Harry Potter sat up in his four-poster bed in the fourth year's Gryffindor dormitory. He groaned and thought back to what happened last night before blissful Morpheus had taken him. Yes, he recalled now with more clarity than he would have preferred. Yesterday was Halloween. The day marked on his calendar each year to ensure he gained a new reminder of why he loathed that day. This absolutely lovely, October 31st, 1994, was the one in which his name came out of the Goblet of Fire. An event that literally still makes no sense. He was a fourth competitor in a Triwizard tournament. Tri meaning three, which can apparently mean four in the wizarding world. A world seemingly apt at making the illogical logical. Three does not mean four unless it involves ancient magic, department heads from the Ministry of Magic, the chief warlock of the Wisengamot, the supreme mugwump of the International Confederation of Wizards, the heads of the three most prestigious schools of magic across Europe, and an aura so paranoid that his moniker was Mad-Eye. When faced with a fourth competitor in a three-participant tournament, those esteemed and distinguished members of the wizarding world simply agreed it would happen regardless. Somehow, being the fourth champion for an unnamed school forced him to compete on the tournament or he'd lose his magic. The best part of the night, though, was yet to come. Harry, over the years, had found himself in absolutely ridiculous situations at this school already, and in those circumstances, he always had his two best friends with him. Ron Weasley, his male best friend, was not with him for this one. The yelling and punch he'd received made that abundantly clear. Hermione Granger, his female best friend, had asked how and why he had done it. That question hurt Harry far more than the punch. Ron had always been a bit jealous, and Harry could see them having a fallout eventually. Hermione, though, should have known better. Her asking was an irreparable breach of his trust, and as if that wasn't enough, her telling him in that condescending tone of hers that she wouldn't be mediating the boys' fallout was the icing on the cake. She'd be distancing herself from both to not show favoritism until they worked it out between them. As Harry had done nothing to bring about Ron's ire, this meant, from his perspective, that she had sided with Ron, and now his two best friends were no longer his friends. Harry wasn't sure if his Quidditch teammates believed him. Angelina and Alicia were upset that they didn't get picked and also distant with him, not openly supportive. George and Fred told him on the train they were going to try and date those two, so even the twins might fail to be vocally supportive of him, and since Katie usually stuck with Angelina and Alicia, he had no idea what she would do. As Harry sat in his bed, realizing just how messed up his year had become, he knew what was about to happen. The fickle school would turn on him once again. The Slytherins, simply because they were led by Draco Malfoy, would harass and bully him whenever they had the chance. Snape would support them and protect his charges from reprisal of any kind. It was always fair to pick on Harry Potter at school. This was a lesson he'd learned long ago, in primary school with Dudley, and was reinforced over the last 3 years at Hogwarts. Yelling out racial slurs against Muggleborns, being hexed in the corridors, verbal threats against your life, or blatant sabotage in classes were just part of his educational experience. This time, however, not a single person would be having his back. No friends to help keep his spirits up as he weathered the storm. No adult within the castle that would stand up for him. Apparently, Dumbledore believed he'd not put his name into the goblet, just as he knew Harry wasn't the heir of Slytherin back in his second year. Not that he ever protected Harry from the mistreatment his peers and Snape dished out at him. Harry supposed he would just go to breakfast to confirm it. A small part of Harry still held out hope. The same tiny part, that sliver of light that kept his spirit burning in the bleak life he'd had before Hagrid smashed down the door and the world of magic burst into his life. Harry was going to force himself to trudge on down to the Great Hall just to see if there was anyone still left in his corner. He'd not been able to think of anyone who would be. He yearned for someone to give him unconditional support. The support he thought his best friends would have given him. That the Gryffindor house would be his new family, just as he was told back in his first year. Harry didn't know what he would do if he ended up all alone again. There was no cupboard at Hogwarts to go and hide in, no place to get some respite if even his housemates turned on him fully. Perhaps behind the curtains of his four-poster bed, he could find his new cupboard, a place where he could at least trust that he would be left to rot in peace, for the most part. It only took him 10 minutes to shower and get ready to go to breakfast. His roommates had already left. Hermione wasn't waiting for him in the common room, watching the stairs with a book in hand eagerly, ready to get their day going together. No Ron to wake up and drag along to get a massive meal down into the unending pit that was his stomach. No, Harry descended the stairs into the common room and there was nobody. A lump formed in his throat as he realized just how lonely he felt. In a warm common room full of life and students, he was left out in the cold. People wouldn't give him a smile or a friendly look. Those who willingly met his eyes only shot nasty or indifferent looks at him. Harry dropped his chin and focused on getting out of there quickly. He made it through the portrait and began working his way through the castle towards the Great Hall. If the looks he got from Gryffindors were unfriendly, then a stronger adjective would be needed even for the ones he got from the Ravenclaw students. Still, Harry kept his head down and walked briskly to get to the Great Hall for breakfast. He made it into the room and forced himself to not look around and see all those who were staring and whispering at him. He could still hear a few jeers calling him a cheater or something in that vein, yet he put one foot in front of the other repeatedly until he got to his table. His normal seating area was devoid of the usual suspects. Ron sat further up the table with his brothers and the Quidditch team. None of them made space for him. In fact, they looked as if they were trying to ensure no space would be open for him. Harry spied Hermione sitting with the fourth-year girls that she normally never spent time around, finding them too full of gossip and not academically inclined enough for her tastes. She sat between Parvati and Lavender with the spot across taken by Faye. Neville, Seamus and Dean were all sitting by Ron, and there were no gaps between them and the fourth-year girls. Harry sighed and sat down at his usual place without anyone beside or across from him. Nobody within easy speaking distance to even try and make polite conversation with as he ate. Harry had finished most of his breakfast by the time the Morning Post arrived. It was obvious who was the main topic on the front page of the paper. A picture of him and the headline "The Cheating Champion" was in bold letters above his name. Harry scanned the head table and no kind looks to be found there. The same as second year, however, without his friends. Harry munched on his food absently until Malfoy interrupted him. "Like them, Potter?" he said with his usual sneer marring his face. Harry glanced up, seeing a badge on his chest. It read "Support Cedric Diggory, the true Hogwarts champion." He tilted his head in confusion as he read it. Why was the badge an issue, he wondered, until he saw the words change. Potter Stinks was now written on them in glaringly obvious size which anyone could read in the hall. The button itself was plain black and the size of an adult hand in circumference. The look of triumph on the blonde Slytherin's face was obvious, gleeful at seeing his rival's face change from confusion to disgust at the taunt. "Every Slytherin already has one and the other houses are clamoring for them. Want one, Potter?" Draco asked with a short laugh. Harry tore his eyes away from the blighter to see if it was true. Most of the students clad in black, green and silver had a button. He could already see Hufflepuff and Ravenclaw students with the offending pin on as well. His face turned to the head table and he saw many of the professors were watching the exchange, showing, yet again, that bullying was blatantly tolerated. A student could walk across the Great Hall in front of the faculty and student population for the sole reason of tormenting another student without worry of admonishment. Harry wondered how he could have been this naive. Harry had his answer now. Nobody was in his corner. Not a single soul in the room spoke up for him or defended him. He did not even see any pity on the faces of any of his peers. There was no point staying in the hall, nothing to be gained responding to Draco. Getting a reaction is why he came over in the first place. If he retaliated with a verbal exchange, or Merlin forbid even pulling his wand, he would have Snape bearing down on him to give him detention. No, his only logical course of action was to leave, to get away from the students and faculty, retreat back to his dorm and figure out what he was going to do. How was he going to get through this now? The only two items he had from his father were in his trunk and suddenly became even more priceless than they were before. He quickly made his way back through the deserted corridors and got to his bed. He went to his trunk and saw someone had tried to get into it. The upgraded security he had put on it after it had been rummaged through in second year held out though. He had his trunk upgraded the following summer, not willing to be so careless with its security again. He could have had his family's heirloom stolen that year by Ginny. The only place within the castle that Harry felt he would find some peace was now compromised. Not even his possessions were safe. What was he going to do now? Harry pulled out his map and cloak, then shrunk his trunk and put it on his bed. He closed the curtains but cast a silencing spell. He wanted to hear if anyone entered the dorm. He sat on the bed with his invisibility cloak on and all of his possessions on him. What was he going to do now? He remembered what McGonagall told him. Champions are excused from the end-of-year exams and classes. They also cannot be assigned detentions which would impact their preparations for the tournament. Harry wondered if he was really even a student now. He wasn't a Hogwarts champion. He was the champion for an unnamed school. Does this mean he doesn't have to attend Hogwarts this year? That was a jarring thought for the teenager. Hogwarts had become his home, but now it felt as welcoming as the horrible house he grew up in. If he wouldn't attend Hogwarts, where could he stay? Could he get to Gringotts and see if he could stay at the Leaky Cauldron again? No, Harry knew that Dumbledore would never allow that. Last time he ran away, he was found at the pub by the Minister of Magic himself. Going there wouldn't get him away from all this vitriol. They'd have him back in his four-poster bed that night. He needed somewhere where he could be hidden, with the wizarding world none the wiser, a place to crash and begin to figure out what he should do. Today was the day that made him realize something. He was alone in the world. Truly alone. Moreover, with his life was in danger every year. He needed to do more than just rely on bad friends and useless adults. Platitudes and good intentions were not enough. The rhetoric of being kept safe was no longer enough. He had to take charge and look out for himself. Perhaps he could go into the Muggle world and hide for a while. However, Harry realized that as a 14-year-old, they'd not let him rent a room anywhere. No decent hotel would take an underage teenager, and if a place ever did, it was more than likely someplace he would want to avoid. The Muggle world wouldn't work, so that left the magical world. Harry chuckled to himself at how naive he was. The magical world for Harry Potter consisted of Platform 9 3/4, Diagon Alley, and Hogwarts. He had no idea of what else was around or even if there was something else. No way to navigate or move around. Diagon Alley wasn't an option, as he'd already dismissed the Leaky Cauldron as a possible lodging. King's Cross wasn't viable either. How would he even get there and back to Hogwarts for the tasks? That only left Hogwarts, the Shrieking Shack, and the Forbidden Forest as options. Harry pulled out the Marauder's map and spoke the words to activate it. I solemnly swear I'm up to no good. That made him softly laugh. He wasn't up to no good as in pranking or anything. He was trying to find a place to stay that was safe, hidden and secret within a magical castle. A secret place? Could that be his answer? Could he stay in the infamous Chamber of Secrets? Nobody but himself could access it, at least in the school. The map provided nothing concrete. Unused classrooms were a possibility, but he would be discovered in time. A couple of days possibly, but not a whole year. Harry was really considering the option when he heard voices in his dorm room. Potter's not here, Dean said to someone Harry couldn't see. That bloody wanker. He cheated and didn't even have the balls to tell me. We could have done it together. After a short pause, he quickly amended what he'd said. So we could have all done it together, Ron's voice said. I can't believe he'd cheat just to get some attention. I would have never thought him to be like that. Dean's voice carried the words to Harry, his voice a bit despondent. First year, everyone fawned over him. Second was the Parselmouth thing. Third year, he had Black after him, and instead of having a quiet fourth year, he cheated himself into the tournament. Maybe he got a taste for the spotlight, Ron mentioned to Dean. Yeah, he's always been in the middle of everything. Wonder how he did it. You'd think he'd have told his best mate. Dean wondered aloud. Probably just showing his true colors. Harry told me the hat wanted to put him in Slytherin. Ron groused. No way. You're pulling my leg. I swear to Merlin it's true. Ron's voice made the vehement argument. Harry knew his words were truthful. He'd told Ron that in confidence. Not so it could be blabbed about behind his back. Wow. Guess we should have known when the snake went after Justin in the dueling club, Dean said in realization. Harry's mind was reeling. He felt as if he had just been blindsided with a punch to the guts. His now former best friend was spilling his secret and twisting the events they, as friends, went through over some stupid tournament. He almost died saving the Git's bloody sister. He was so mad that he missed what the two boys were saying for a minute. I tried to get into his trunk and throw his stuff out of here, but he had it locked and now it's gone. Where could that tosser have gone? Ron mused loudly. Forget about that betraying twat for now. Gobstones? Harry didn't hear Ron agree to play with Dean and leave. He couldn't believe what he had just heard. Ron had tried to break into his trunk and throw him out of the dorm. This went beyond any jealousy which might have been forgiven. Irreversible damage had just occurred to their friendship. His friendship with Ron Weasley would never fully recover from this. The Chamber of Secrets and the rotting basilisk corpse didn't sound so bad now. It was a place that held rather bad memories and an ancient monster, and yet that sounded better than being at school. Harry made up his mind after overhearing his so-called friends talk about him. He slowly crept through the common room and waited for someone to exit the common room, quickly following them. He wanted to give no clues as to his whereabouts. It didn't take long to descend from the Gryffindor Tower to the second-floor bathroom, usually haunted by moaning Myrtle. The wailing ghost was not present, and that perfectly suited to keeping his entrance into the fabled chamber a secret. Harry opened the way and hopped down. Upon landing, he realized he had forgotten an important detail. The entrance had collapsed and only Fawkes had been able to get him out. He looked at the mess Lockhart had caused inside, realizing he would need to try and burrow his way through the rock pile towards the main chamber entrance. Harry pulled out his wand and began levitating the rocks from the small opening he and Ron had communicated through. His hand tightened on his wand just by thinking about his former friend. How could he turn his back on Harry and accuse him of cheating after this harrowing ordeal in the chamber? Slowly but surely, an opening was beginning to form. Rock after rock was moved and beads of sweat rolled down his face as he continued to try and make a hole large enough to get through. It took 15 minutes of levitating and a couple near collapses before there was an adequate opening. Harry climbed up the rock pile and slipped through the gap to the other side of the cave-in. Harry thought he'd feel a sense of foreboding, but it never came. The massive shed skin was outside the main chamber and the door had sealed itself. Harry said open in Parseltongue and the doors did as commanded. He slowly sauntered in and was confused by what he saw. The massive carcass of the basilisk was still there, looking the same as far as he could tell from the day he left the chamber. It had not decomposed at all and didn't even smell. Furthering his befuddlement was the lack of damage to the chamber. He distinctly remembered the basilisk causing damage as it moved around and struck at him. Instead, the Chamber of Secrets looked as it had when he first entered. Now that he thought about it further, shouldn't the place be caked in dust with so few people ever coming down here? He looked around the chamber for further evidence of his previous time here. There was the broken fong that he used to destroy the diary, but the blood from his wound was no longer staining the floor. Though he had not felt uneasiness when he first entered, he was now on edge. Even the unused classrooms had layers of dust if they hadn't been used for years. And yet, this secret chamber was spotless. Was there someone or something that cleaned it? Could it be a house elf? Some kind of magic embedded in the chamber? Harry continued to move towards the center of the chamber with his wand in his dominant hand and a clinch on it that made his knuckles pronounced and white in his exertion. Another thought struck him, just how useless his magical education had been for practical things. It would certainly be nice to know a spell to detect people, animals, magical presences, or any kind of magical being. Instead, he had to look around like a common muggle, albeit with a magic wand in hand. Not that the wand was overly useful since he knew only a few offensive spells and they weren't quick to cast. Their wand motions were not second nature to him, and if anyone got a jump on him, he'd be hard-pressed to make his wand the formidable weapon he knew it was and which he should be wielding. It was closer to a fancy stick in a life-and-death situation, based on his magical education so far. He used his bare hands against Quirrell like a common thug. In his second year, he used a sword like a medieval muggle. At least in third year, he did disarm someone and cast the Patronus to drive off the Dementors. That encounter still had a bad taste in his mouth though. Without Sirius being an animagus, he would have been dead to rights against the werewolf. 3 years of schooling and he was still rather useless, with what should have been an incredibly dangerous weapon. Instead, it was nothing more than a well-crafted stick in his hands. The one item he had that gave him some peace of mind, while creeping around the chamber, was his father's invisibility cloak, a family heirloom. Even then, it had been seen through by Dumbledore and it didn't make him imperceivable. Harry continued moving around as quietly as he could, looking for anything that seemed out of place. His gut, however, didn't give him the sense that there was anything to be concerned about. After walking around the main chamber for a while, Harry was unable to detect anything suspicious. Some unexplained anomalies bothered him, particularly his blood missing, for he was unable to explain how it disappeared. The prevalent theory in his 14-year-old mind was that a Hogwarts house elf cleaned the Chamber of Secrets. There was a benefit to the theory as Harry happened to know a Hogwarts elf. Taking his cloak off, Harry tested if he was liable to be attacked by anything he had failed to detect. He stood 15 feet away from the basilisk and called for his friend Dobby. With the standard pop, Dobby arrived, all beady-eyed, in front of Harry. "Master Harry Potter, sir," the elf squeaked with fanatical adoration for the teen who'd freed him. "Hi Dobby, how are you?" However much he wanted help, it would be rude to not inquire after the elf's well-being, at the very least. He was also surprised that the little elf was able to pop down here. He could have helped with the cave-in. "Great Master is too kind to ask after poor Dobby." The quick change from excited adoration to delighted tears threw Harry off-kilter. The elf seemed unbalanced. Perhaps all the punishing from the Malfoys knocked a few screws loose. Having not met many house elves, Harry didn't have much of a sample size to accurately comment on how sane this particular elf was. "Dobby be so happy now that Harry Potter calls for him. What can is be doing for great Master Harry Potter, sir?" Harry kinda wanted to get right to the point of calling Dobby because he still had the lingering feeling he was missing something about the chamber. "Dobby, do the Hogwarts elves clean this place? Where be we Master Harry Potter, sir?" Harry's head moved back half an inch in surprise. How did the elf not know he was still in Hogwarts? That question postulated practical testing, but at the present point, it wasn't the time for practical tests. Perhaps later, if his plan to make this his home for the year worked, he may have the time to do just that. "We are in the Chamber of Secrets at Hogwarts, can't you tell?" Dobby, for once, did not answer right away. He seemed to concentrate on something before looking around quickly. "Dobby be knowing we's not be in Hogwarts. Magic be different but Hogwarts be connected." The little elf was actively trying to accurately articulate some kind of complexity about magic to Harry. Apparently, the chamber was more than just a hidden cave which could only be found by parselmouths. The place was clearly connected to Hogwarts, however. A house elf, one who works at Hogwarts, thinks they are somewhere else. Fascinating indeed, but far beyond Harry's understanding of magic. He'd love to investigate the mystery if he wasn't just too busy in a deadly tournament, finding housing for himself and figuring out how to survive on his own. He snorted at how absurd this year had become in the span of 2 days. "Dobby, I want to move here instead of staying in the Gryffindor Tower. Can you help me with setting it up with a bedroom, furniture to study, a loo, and maybe even a shower?" "Master Harry Potter, sir, be staying here?" The elf didn't seem to like that answer from the obvious change in his body language. "Yes. Do you think you can help me with that?" Again, Harry was cursing how useless his education had been on practical magic. He knew it was certainly possible to transfigure items into furniture or even conjure them, but he'd not learned it. Plumbing or water conjuration and vanishing would have been rather important to know right about now. Hopefully, Dobby could help in the meantime. Harry had to get to work on learning practical magic. "There already be's a bedroom, bathroom, and study hayrace. Master Harry Potter, sir, be wanting more?" the elf asked with confusion. "There are." Utterly bewildered, Harry blurted out the question in response. The little elf nodded enthusiastically, proud to be helping the boy who freed him. "Where?" he asked immediately. Dobby quickly walked towards the main statue where the basilisk came out of the mouth of Salazar Slytherin but broke off to the right. He walked along the side of the pool of water and then right, to what appeared to be a dead end. "It be's right hayrace." As he said it, he snapped his fingers and a faint outline of the door opened. The rectangle was illuminated as well as a single point that could where a door handle or locking mechanism would be. Harry ran his hand along the stone wall, and right in the center of the illuminated circle was a sharp point which Harry's middle fingertip ran afoul of. Pricked it enough to draw blood. Almost immediately the illuminated portion of the wall swung back from one side with the other, seemingly on a hinge. Harry cast Lumos and looked at Dobby. "Can you tell if it is safe, Dobby?" Dobby got a look of complete concentration on his face and he shut his eyes tight. His little hand pointed towards the door for a moment before he broke his concentration. Dobby not be feeling any traps or humans. Harry plucked up that ever-so-useful Gryffindor reckless courage and went for it. He did have the presence of mind to put on his cloak, however. Harry went through the door with Dobby trailing after him. He found himself in a rather wide hallway with multiple doors on each side. From what he could see, there were 2 doors on the left and 3 on the right side. The first door he could reach was on the left side. Harry cast Nox to end the light from his wand as the hall seemed to have sensed his presence and lit up. Harry reached the first door and held down the handle to open it, pushing the heavy wooden door inward. The room was illuminated and Harry was surprised to find what was inside this room. A large 4-poster bed, a small fire, a bird perch and a comfortable-looking armchair and couch set by the fireplace. The room was finished with a lighter-colored wood flooring with dark wood furniture and dark green, almost black, couches and linens. There were silver-colored metal accents on the furniture, and they shined almost as if they were the actual metal. Harry cautiously entered into the room, and when he did, he noticed there was a large bookshelf to his right. The bed was on the far left, its back towards the entrance to the hallway he just entered through. The fireplace and furniture were almost directly in front, and a large area rug was positioned underneath the fireplace sitting area. Harry noticed the same oddity from back in the main chamber. The place was clean and looked as if it could be a current place of habitation for Salazar Slytherin himself. It was certainly lavish enough. Pushing the thought from his head, he crossed the room towards the door that was straight ahead on the opposite side of the door facing the hallway. It was an entrance to what looked to be a bathroom, seeing as the door was ajar. As he stepped through, he saw he was actually wrong. It was to a closet, a walk-through, a closet which leads into a bathroom. Harry did feel eerie with this discovery. Lots of clothing was hung from the racks and probably in the chest of drawers, though he was not going to open at this time. He could see acromantula silk robes and surmised most of the wardrobe would be of high quality. Harry walked towards the bathroom and continued on through the closet and into the bathroom. Opulent was the word that came to mind. It was very bright as well. White stone floors that were warm. A massive tub that doubled as a pool large enough for multiple people to move around comfortably. Large counter spaces. A silver sink and dark green highlights on the mostly white and silver room. Harry had seen lavish hotel advertisements in the Muggle world, and 5-star felt as if it was a star short of the rating he'd give the accommodations so far. There was a distinct feeling that the elegance of the room was only possible with magic. At the opposite end of the ridiculously spacious bathroom, there was another door, though it was closed. Harry moved towards it with Dobby still padding on behind him. Neither was saying anything as they were investigating and observing the living quarters found within the Chamber of Secrets. Harry took the time to try the taps and dip his hand into the water to see how they fared. The water in the pool was the perfect temperature and everything worked better than he had expected. After spending time checking out the bathroom, he went into the next room. The door opened towards him and swung back into the bathroom. Another heavy wooden door. Harry was shocked at what he was seeing. The headmaster had a large office with endless books and ornate furniture, but they paled compared to this room. It was the pinnacle of a personal study that Harry could ever imagine. Rows of perfectly ordered books, well at first glance anyway, adorned the bookcases. The bookcases looked to be hand-carved with a snake motif and the Slytherin crest. The scales on the snakes were carved and they looked almost lifelike, aside from being made of wood. Harry took his sweet time moving through the room. It was very large for a personal study. It was so large and filled to the brim with books that it would be more accurate to call it a personal library with only a single desk to work at. Harry decided to try and open a book. He plucked one off the shelf and opened it. He was thankful it didn't scream or anything like some books in the restricted section did the first time he was in there, under his cloak. Instead, the book was completely blank, without a single word. Harry thought he could feel that the contents of the book were simply masked from his perception, as though he knew it was there but it was magically protecting its contents. Shrugging to himself, he put it back and tried a couple more, each time with the same results. All of the books he had tried were empty, and he felt they were obscured in some magical way for some reason he hadn't grasped yet. Harry continued around the room and pulled the odd book to see the same results as with all of them. He made his way to the massive desk that commanded the room and saw a single leather-bound black book in the middle. The rest of the desk was devoid of any further items. The large desk, which could accommodate a dozen books, had but a single plain-looking black book on it. Harry didn't really give heed to any traps as he sat in the incredibly comfortable chair and opened the first page. To my descendant. My life's end fast approaches. My time has been nearing its end. I have long seen my death, and the end of my path is almost at hand. I have quarreled with Godric and Helga for the last time. Rowena sides with me but will not broach the issue, to the brink of where it will cause a chasm between us, and thus I have decided to retire to my hidden chamber. Only those of the serpent bloodline will be able to enter into my personal quarters. My familiar will remove anyone unworthy from gaining entry. Those that speak the noble tongue may gain entry into the main chamber. Nevertheless, just the serpent bloodline will garner access to my quarters. This is my final place of solitude where I will spend the end of my days. My final project is of utmost importance. I have long labored to bring about this task and seek to leave a path for worthy heirs to glean my wisdom. What the histories speak of me is no concern of mine. Those born of the mundane world should be treated as magical orphans and their existence wiped from the mundane world. Their lack of education, inability to navigate the magical world, and ignorance slow down the entire first 2 years of education. Our students would be better served learning magic and theory from a young age and beginning spellcasting after their first magical maturity, aged 11. Important courses like runic magic and the arithmancy of magic could be taught prior to their magical maturity. The material covered in their final year should be taught in their 5th year, followed then by 2 years of apprenticeship. A whole new wing of the castle would need to be added. Additional staff necessary to teach and look after those students and magical orphans as well. Magical children have no place in the mundane world, and every mundane that learns of us increases the threat. Already we have had to withstand multiple sieges upon our lands. Rowena understands the necessity for the academic success of our students, but the unholy pair of Godric and his wife Helga refuse to consider breaking up mundane families, even when they return home and are murdered by the mundanes. Our arguments are well documented, and I will say no further on the matter. The two will not be swayed, and Rowena is too content in her pursuit of magical knowledge to consider taking up the cause with me. Mine own endeavors have left me a broken and crippled man. I have long since lost my magical prowess, though none of the three is aware of it. Delving into ritualistic magic has left me with numerous unwanted ailments that I can no longer delay. My pursuit of advantages and power over any opponents has caught up to me. My line will die with me as I have intended. I have sired progeny, however none will carry my name on. They may be spawned by mine own loins and carry my blood within, but they won't be my heirs. Only those with the ability to heed my words, who yearn for knowledge and accept wisdom, will be worthy. Slytherin is a name for a true heir of mine. My seed and blood do not make one entitled to be the heir of Salazar Slytherin. My firstborn son, to the only wife I took, was a simple proof of it. The boy was too eager to follow in my footsteps. He failed to understand the consequences of his actions as he tried to gain my notoriety. The boy was foolish, naive, and power-hungry. His arrogance and lack of wisdom caused his death and the heart of my wife as well. I fathered him the best I could, and the boy failed to heed my words. I lead him to the fountain of wisdom, but he would not drink of it. The great sorcerers of magic have oft let their name pass on, and while I have accepted that I will not pass my name to any of those I have directly sired, my hope is one day someone will prove worthy of my name. A gifted heir that will heed my teachings and allow my mistakes, forged through mine own failures, to temper them with experience and wisdom. You who have found this book and are currently reading it have passed the first set of tests. You were able to find the hidden chamber of mine, speaks the noble tongue, and have bypassed the protector of my private sanctuary, and also have proved cunning enough to find that which is not obvious. You have the potential to be great, a true serpent lord. Continue to prove yourself worthy. Contained within this book is the path to becoming more than even myself. Magical power on its own does not make one formidable. Magical power without knowledge is wasted. Power and knowledge without being tempered by experience are impotent. My purpose in writing this book is to pass on my wisdom, knowledge, experience, to create a path to power that will allow you to become more than myself. My lack of experience and knowledge led to mistakes, which have now caught up to me. I have not been a true power in magic for a few years now. My magic is weak, my body failing, but my mind is as sharp as ever. It is my mind that has kept the facade of my greatness intact." Harry was enraptured as he continued reading until his stomach growled loudly. He realized he had missed lunch and was now well into dinner time. He'd continued reading the anecdotes of the infamous founder. The introduction went page by page and seemed to have a way of determining if he actually read the words or not. It was disconcerting, much like the chamber itself, yet more comfortable than being in the castle proper. Harry looked around to see if Dobby was around. He had gotten engrossed in the book and forgotten about the diminutive being. "Dobby," he called out skeptically after not seeing him. He popped into existence. "Yes, Master Harry Potter, sir?" The elf was far too excitable in his talking and general demeanor. He was a good friend and useful person who was totally loyal, and that was what mattered right now. "If I stay here, are you able to help me out with food, drinks and clothes and stuff? I brought my trunk and everything, and I can stay in the room here this year if you can help with that stuff." Dobby actually frowned at that. "You means Bess like your elf?" Harry couldn't tell if that was asked in muted excitement or if it was upsetting him that he was being asked to not be free. So he backtracked. "Sorry, Dobby. I thought you'd want to help me, but if it means you have to do something you don't want to, then I'll figure something out." Harry wasn't really sure what he was going to do. He could sneak to the kitchens, but he'd be found out rather quickly then. Someone would notice, probably Dumbledore, and catch up to him. He was hoping to go off the grid except during the tasks. Harry hadn't noticed Dobby's eyes tearing up as his eyes had dropped along with his head. The elf was so overcome with happiness he hadn't been able to respond. Harry's own insecurity was rearing its ugly head, thinking another person was going to reject him. Dobby launched himself at the raven-haired teenager, saying yes over and over at how excited he was. He'd never thought he'd be worthy enough for Harry Potter. The miscommunication was solved and Dobby bonded. With the day getting away, Harry only ate dinner then set himself up, not having even explored the other side of the hall. Dobby had and told him there was a larger library with all blank books, a potions lab and a large room for practicing magic and physical training. XXXXXX. Harry trudged into another day of classes. Today was Thursday and the first class was Transfiguration with Ravenclaw. He'd already experienced the other house's feelings towards him being the fourth champion. Harry's wonderful luck had his very first class after being selected as a champion be herbology. The course was taught by the head of Hufflepuff, and if that wasn't rotten enough, the Gryffindors were paired with the Hufflepuffs. Sprout made it very clear how happy she was with Harry for being selected as a champion. He'd lost house points before in herbology when he had deserved on rare occasions. Sprout had always been genial and fair to Gryffindor. 2 days after his name coming out of the accursed goblet, her entire demeanor towards him changed. She channeled her inner Snape and made it clear he was persona non grata in her greenhouse. The class felt the same as the worst potions classes with the Slytherins. He was actively sabotaged by his classmates and she turned a blind eye like Snape. Macmillan and Abbott acted like they were Malfoy and Parkinson. Sprout ignored it and took off needless points for him just breathing the same air, it seemed. She even allowed a group of 3 so that Harry couldn't have a partner. How he made it out of class without a detention he didn't know. His 2 former best friends had partnered up with others and given him the cold shoulder. Ron even glared at him and smirked at him being picked on by another member of the faculty. Snape was only worse in that he actively insulted both Harry, Gryffindors, and James Potter. Sprout didn't drop to quite that level, not that it made Harry feel any better. Herbology was followed by care of magical creatures with the Slytherins, and that did not add anything positive to his day. Hagrid had been standoffish to him, unsure on how to act considering Harry's 2 friends were antagonistic or outright ignoring him. Divination comprised his afternoon and was filled with predictions of his imminent suffering and death. Harry took all of his meals in the chamber and used the map and his cloak to navigate around. Day after day he saw no understanding, no compassion, no kindness. Hatred and contempt lurked all around him, and they were only buoyed by indifference to his loneliness. Tuesday brought history of magic in the morning and potions in the afternoon. He did not deign to go to nap time. Instead, he continued reading and learning from the works of Salazar Slytherin. Potions was as bad as he expected. Wednesday he only bothered to leave the chamber for charms class. where at least Flitwick didn't loathe him by sight. Thursday was the day he had hoped would be helpful. Double transfiguration with his head of house. Harry took off his cloak in an alcove not far from the classroom and walked cautiously towards the classroom. He'd been hexed more than once in the hallways and was now wary of any approaching student. He'd taken to walking with his wand in hand. He rounded the corner and took the half-dozen steps and entered the classroom. Upon entering, he could already see Hermione was paired up with Lavender and Ron with Seamus. Everyone was ignoring his looks. Sully put her book bag onto the empty seat beside her when she caught him looking at the open place beside her. Harry sighed, understanding how this was going to be. Harry found an open pairing and sat down there. He was in the back right corner of the classroom. Only Parvati and Padma Patil sat behind him. He'd taken to sitting in the periphery of the classrooms so he could see potential sabotage or hexes coming easier. McGonagall made her way to the front and began lecturing on cross-species transfiguration, and Harry zoned out. He had read the chapter ahead of time and was well aware of the theory already. He was thinking about what he should do. His time in the castle was making him dread every second he spent out of the Chamber of Secrets. Everyone hated him or was indifferent. Even his father's two best friends were useless. Sirius sent a short reply to listen to Dumbledore and follow his advice. Remus hadn't even written back. He was with Sirius wherever they were at, as they both signed the same useless letter back to him. McGonagall caught Harry not paying attention. Mr. Potter, her voice rang out through the deadly quiet atmosphere like a hot knife through butter. Harry perked back up and focused back on what was going on in class again. Care to repeat what I've just said? She gave him her stern glare. Harry quickly glanced around with just his eyes and saw there was no help from any other students. He didn't have to speak, as the Transfiguration Mistress easily could see he had not been listening. Would you care to enlighten us as to what was more interesting than paying attention to your professor? She continued to try and drill into his head with her piercing gaze. Nothing, Professor, he responded, knowing he was caught zoned out. Excuses that he already knew the material wouldn't help him in the least when she was looking at him like that. They never worked for anyone else before, and he wouldn't start now. Detention tonight with me. She glared at him one final time and the continued lecturing. Harry glanced around the room again and caught the smug look on Ron's face. Seamus and Dean sported similar looks. In fact, most of the room seemed rather jovial at him be handed out a detention. XXXXXX. After a week of being in the Chamber of Secrets, for the first time, Harry felt at ease with his new accommodations. He wasn't at the Dursley home, where he was treated as a slave. He wasn't at the overcrowded Weasley home, and he also wasn't in a dorm room full of snoring boys. No shared accommodation at all. He was in a place for just himself. That was the crux of the situation, really. Harry had always tried to find adults to rely on. He had always yearned for a family, for somebody to come and be his knight, a savior to love and protect him. It was a dream he'd always had. Growing up in a dank cupboard and being mistreated had left its mark. A family, love, support was what he wanted. When Hagrid knocked down the door, that was what he saw. Finally, somebody was coming for him. Just him. Rather, it was an introduction into a new world which also treated him poorly. New bullies to pick on him that the teachers ignored. New trouble to get into to try and help those that he thought cared about him. Instead, he now had a new list of people who were not but acquaintances. Albus Dumbledore controlled his life and sent him to live with his aunt and uncle. The man that never told him what was truly going on. He gave only enough information to sate you while holding back the real substance. He'd never been told just why he was so important to Riddle, even when he'd asked in his first year. The Dementor-induced memory of what really happened on October 31st, 1981 was clear. Voldemort was willing to spare his mother to kill him. He was the target, not his parents. He always wanted to know why and had asked only to never be told. He was given platitudes and fed milk when he wanted substance. He was treated like a baby in terms of dispensing information. There was something at work with Dumbledore that Harry could not trust. Far too many questions that he had not riddled out yet. Why did Hagrid have his bank key? Why did Dumbledore not give his father's cloak back to him immediately if he had it? What happened to his parents' stuff? All he had were the photos from Hagrid and a cloak. Didn't his parents and grandparents have physical items? Their home was attacked, but now, apparently, it was a monument of some kind. Even Neville had his dad's wand. Where were his parents' wands, and why did Harry not have them? The Hogwarts books for most core subjects were the same as when his parents went to school. Could he not have used theirs? Given the money in the trust vault, there must be more somewhere with records of their previous financial statements. Nobody had offered to take him to see the final resting place of his parents, and Albus Dumbledore, his magical guardian, should have done so. Was he really bound to compete as Crouch and Dumbledore told him? There was far too much that didn't add up around the headmaster to trust him. His parents' best friends hadn't even truly looked out for him. Remus Lupin had taught him the Patronus charm, but Harry had to almost beg him for it. Aside from that, he'd never offered to help the only child of his best friends. Where was he during the other dozen years of his life? Why did he not help or even visit Harry when he was growing up? The man had, negligently, tried to kill Harry when he hadn't taken his wolfsbane potion. Then he ran away again after being outed as a werewolf by Snape. He wouldn't have even bothered to say goodbye if Harry hadn't caught him in the act. Then, he hadn't even sent any letters or anything. If best friends were the same as Ron was to him, then he certainly understood Lupin's actions. Ron was a friend with deep issues that never let him be truly loyal. He was a fair-weather friend. When things were going well, he would bask in the relationship. When he felt slighted and perceived something to be jealous and petty about, he broke the friendship. Normally, he turned back into being his best friend, again shortly afterwards. For Harry, that meant he was never truly a friend in the first place. There were things in Ron's life that were far more important than his friendship with Harry. If those things were limited to blood family, he would have understood. When the more important things to Ron were fame, fortune, and being more than a sidekick, Harry failed to understand. Sirius, his father's best mate, had a similar issue. Sirius had far too many trivial priorities ahead of taking care of his godson. He was supposed to look after Harry like a parent if anything happened to his. Due to his own actions, he never was able to. Further, he was also not a suitable adult figure to learn from or emulate to any real degree. The man had prioritized revenge over Harry not once, but twice. When he freed himself, he didn't even try and contact Harry or set things right. He didn't try and get legal help or prove his case. All he cared about, again, was killing the traitor. He certainly had James Potter at the very top of his priority list, but that did not transfer to his duty as a godfather. Harry was yet again an afterthought. Harry had even gone back in time with Hermione and saved the man's life. Sirius still had more urgent matters. Running off to a tropical island and living it up was the correct thing to do, apparently. Harry lived behind blood wards and apparently the safest place for him during the summer. The Ministry had never even stepped foot on the property, and they hadn't deemed any reason for extra protection at all. Instead of finding a way to visit Harry or even stay with him in secret, he left, sending only token letters to keep in contact. It was as if the gift of his firebolt would make it all better. Harry really thought that it was guilt or just wanting to buy his affections. Perhaps it was a desire to see Harry fly, so he was reminded of his best friend, James Potter. Whatever Sirius Black's reasons were, Harry knew the man didn't care about him like his parents would have hoped. He cared, he just did not care enough to put Harry at the top of the things most important to him. Practical jokes, seducing women, running from his family legacy, living a carefree life were what mattered to him. If Harry could find a way to assist in those areas, he would be a great fit. If he could vicariously live through Harry in one of those areas, he would be all over it. Harry could well imagine the letter he would get back if he asked for help seducing girls or pranking Slytherins. Sending one asking for help from a life-threatening tournament. He only got a lame response about listening to the man who had failed to protect him from it in the first place. One of the few adults who had Harry near the top of their priority list was, ironically, Severus Snape. The man had caught some kind of ceaseless contagion to ensure he hates Harry Potter. Remus hinted it was something to do with his dad, and Snape's comments that he was like his father were the trail of breadcrumbs to validate that theory. Snape had incessantly picked on him and destroyed his potions education. He'd protected his Slytherins when they bullied and sabotaged Harry, or anyone in general, and was an absolutely horrible professor. Harry had no idea why Dumbledore would ever let that man teach, though there had to be a good reason. Snape was always at important meetings or events. Why was he in the meeting with the school heads when his name came out? Moody as a former Auror, his presence made sense. McGonagall is his head of house and the deputy headmistress. It was simply logical she was there. Snape had no business being there. His only contribution to the whole meeting was harassing a 14-year-old orphan, one who was being railroaded into participating in a deadly tournament for of-age wizards and witches. Snape was the man who'd ruined Lupin's teaching career and kept Black from being set free. He even tried to get the man killed. His hatred of James Potter and his friends ran far too deep. How Dumbledore allowed him to even be around him was a wonder. Hermione had been the one that cut the deepest. She had been saved by him in his first year and was steadfast in her support of him, mostly. Harry had not really noticed it until he truly began to reflect back on his life at Hogwarts. The girl was his friend so long as it came after what was important to her. In fact, most of his friendship with her could be explained by her desires and not actually being his friend. She desired to not be alone and be a cast out. Befriending the most famous student at the school achieved that. It also ensures she gained the notoriety she wanted for her academic achievements. She valued authority and knowledge far more than his friendship. She never truly understood Harry. How could she, when she and Ron never asked him many personal questions? They were never interested in getting to know Harry Potter, just him as the boy who lived. In the end, Harry realized there wasn't a single adult in the Muggle or Wizarding worlds he could trust to look out for his interests. Every single one of them who should have helped look after his safety and well-being had failed in unconscionable ways. He'd never had any real friends. He was willing to put his life on the line for his best friend's sister. He was willing to give his life to stop a madman, and perhaps that was what they wanted all along. Neville's family was targeted like Harry's was. His parents were tortured into insanity, and yet he was okay to live in the Wizarding world. It was fine for Harry to live at the Leaky Cauldron while the apparent right-hand man of Voldemort himself was actively trying to kill him. No issues spending huge bouts of time in Diagon Alley, unsupervised even, while any wizard could have a chance to abduct him. But Harry had to grow up with Muggles who hated him and return there every year. There was no rational thought process which allowed that to make sense in Harry's mind. No, at the end of the day Harry was on his own, just as he always had been. He really only trusted Dobby and Hedwig. Everyone else he knew he just couldn't trust, after really taking the time to examine his life. With a little luck, he'd found his way into what could possibly be a mentor. The memoirs and magic left behind by Salazar Slytherin. Harry had read incessantly in the man's personal study all about his history. He'd lived a hard life and admitted to being too power-hungry, too eager for infamy and not wise. With age came wisdom, and he was a teacher at heart in his older years. He was 3 decades older than Godric, Harry had discovered. He was in his 70s by the time Hogwarts was proposed. He had already married and buried the love of his life. He'd had to personally end the life of his own son, bringing about his wife's death. He admitted he did not have the heart to confirm if she'd killed herself or if natural heartbreak and the loss of her will to live did her in. By this point in time, he was already notorious as someone you dared not cross. A powerful wizard that was the epitome of ambition and cunning. He was renowned for being politically savvy and ruthless in ensuring he got what he wanted. There were scant few details so far, but the man painted quite the tale to open his memoir. Understanding that power was a means to an end, that it was not in and of itself a worthy goal. Gaining power for the sake of having more power was what had led him to his downfall. Sacrificing trivial things that built up over time to undo all of his hard work. By the time when he was founding Hogwarts, he was already aware he was declining. Powerful wizards could live to be 200 years old, and 3 decades short of his reaching the 1st century, he was deteriorating. The decline for a wizard normally began prior to being 100, but it was a slow and steady erosion of magical and physical abilities. Salazar had become almost unimaginably powerful for just half a century. Then he had a sharp decline. Harry wondered if this was what led to the twisting of the story. There was a fallout with 2 of the 3 other founders and frustration at the 3rd. However, Salazar had not indicated any altercations beyond a verbal disagreement, only a difference of opinions on how to best educate students. Salazar wanted to push their education standards to their zenith at the cost of taking mundane children from their parents. It was hard to tell for sure, but it seemed like Slytherin had a rather rough upbringing and had an inability to appreciate the importance of families raising their children. Nothing that he read hinted that Salazar was a bigot of the highest order who fought to rule over or kill mundanes as he was now portrayed. Perhaps the voluntary isolation, as he could not stand to see himself decline in front of others, was the cause to the generally accepted theory of him being a pure-blood supremacist. It was something to consider looking into, and yet Harry's attention was on continuing to read the memoir. Apparently, it was going to teach him, and Harry was eager to see where it got started. He looked up from the book when he heard Dobby pop into existence beside him with a plate of food. "Lunch for Master Harry," Dobby exclaimed with his usual excitement. It had taken multiple conversations to shorten Great Master Harry Potter, sir, into just Master Harry. Dobby refused to not acknowledge him as Master. Harry tried pointing out friends don't call each other Master, but the elf steadfastly refused. "Thanks, Dobby. How are you today?" Harry was doing his best to try and turn the relations closer to that of friends instead of servant and master. Asking how Dobby's day was did seem to confuse the little guy for a few days. It was something he'd never had to respond to before. "Dobby be good and Dobby be having news, Master Harry." Harry turned from his food to look at the elf. "What kind of news?" he asked aloud. "Headmaster be searching for yous. You's been missing and they think you have run away." Ah, Harry had been so engrossed in his new solitary dwelling that he'd forgotten that leaving the castle life abruptly would draw attention. He should have realized it, but he hadn't even considered it at all. Oh, he'd also forgotten to make sure he could see Hedwig. That was seriously not a good idea. The owl was going to be so angry at him for this. Realizing which situation was more important, he made immediate plans to react accordingly. "Dobby, do you know if there's a way to be able to let Hedwig in here?" The elf closed his eyes and concentrated again. Harry had asked him about it earlier in the week. Dobby had said it was how he focused on feeling his surroundings, extending and focusing his senses to find out more about his dwelling. It was house elf magic he'd learned and used for a long time. "There be charmed wall where the owl can get through. Dobby be doing it." The little elf popped away before Harry could respond to go do the work. That meant Harry could send out letters. He'd not thought about the fact nobody could contact him while he was here. That was certainly an issue to consider. Harry felt his list was growing longer day after day of all the items he needed to look into. First and foremost still was securing his own future. If he actually had to compete in the tournament and looking into how to become independent. A visit to Gringotts might be prudent to find out about a full accounting of his assets. A trust vault implies there is more than just what is held in the trust vault. In the Muggle world, often rich kids were given a set amount until they became adults. Perhaps it was the same in the wizarding world. That rocketed to the top of his list. Visit Gringotts and see if they are aware of how to become an adult in the wizarding world. He should probably ask what types of services they offer to their clients and see if they can help him with anything else. At this point, he was more likely to trust a business than a person. Businesses were about making a profit, and as long as they could make a profit by servicing their clients, they should be somewhat trustworthy. He'd have to be careful to read everything clearly before signing, however. Now though, he had to write a note for Hogwarts. What should he tell them? "I am hidden and you will never find me, ha ha ha," might be fun to send. No, he should mislead them to make them look elsewhere for him. He'd not put it past Dumbledore to send people searching for him. Sending them on a bit of a wild goose chase would be for the best. With that in mind, he wrote out a letter to send. "To whom it may concern. As I have been named a Triwizard tournament champion of no school, I have sought to remove myself from Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. My fellow Gryffindors and the school's population made it clear I am not their champion and I have removed myself. There were hexes, curses, verbal remarks, and physical demonstrations that I was persona non grata in the school. Yet again, after my trunk was attempted to be broken into, I no longer felt safe. Many of the altercations which led to this belief occurred in front of Hogwarts staff and they took no action. I even became the focus of their ire for something beyond my control. I am a champion for an undesignated school and am seeking education alternatives at this time. I am withdrawing from Hogwarts this year. Regardless of my withdrawal as a champion, I am excused from classes, detentions, and examinations. I will not be at Hogwarts while learning and have been given no information on the first task other than the fact it is on November 24th. Please provide any further details for events or requirements for the champion's attendance by mail with Hedwig. My owl is the only one able to reach me at this time. Harry Potter. While writing the letter, Harry came to the realization he should send it to McGonagall. She wrote the letters for Hogwarts, and he wouldn't put it past the headmaster to try and use Hedwig to find him. Well, Hedwig may actually be a bad option. They could try and keep her hostage. Now that he considered it further, Harry thought there was a rather small chance they wouldn't try and track Hedwig. He was a runaway celebrity after all. Perhaps a different solution. Dobby. Yes, Master Harry, he said after appearing out of thin air. Can you deliver a letter to Professor McGonagall? Of course, Master Harry. Dobby can be doing, he replied exuberantly. Okay, I'm going to send Hedwig to Gringotts, and when she leaves, can you deliver it then to the professor? Dobby nodded, and Harry handed the elf the letter before he left. Harry then composed his letter to Gringotts. Dear Gringotts, I am Harry James Potter and have only been to your bank on a couple of occasions. I was told the vault I access is a trust vault. This has led to my suspicion that I possibly have more than a single vault, or the vault that I am using has limits given my status as a minor. I was hoping to find out more about what assets I am entitled to at this point in time and what is to come in the future. If there is a person to ask for when I come to the bank next, please advise me so I can best follow your procedures. The other item I would like to ask about is if you are able to provide a list of services Gringotts offers its clients. A description of the service and the cost would also be appreciated. As I was Muggle-raised, I am unaware of your complete service offerings. I am currently housed in a location that will only accept mail from my owl. I have instructed her to remain until a reply is ready. Respectfully yours, Harry James Potter. Harry tied the note, and Hedwig had already landed at the desk in front of him. She always had a knack of knowing when she was needed. With that, Harry decided this was enough for the day and to get back to the memoir of Salazar Slytherin. His best guess was, as he worked through the memoir, more books in the library would stop being blank. How the magic worked, Harry had no idea. The magic that Salazar had cast to guide this place was simply astounding. He realized he shouldn't expect less from a founder of such a marvelous school. Students of magic need to understand two basic facts before undertaking their tutelage in magical studies. The first is the most important, and it is simply that magic is sentient. The second required understanding is that there are four basic pillars of magic: intent, willpower, creativity, and magical power. It is obvious to any rational thinking person who studies magic that it is sentient. How else would it be able to discern the true intent of the caster? You cannot make a binding oath without the intention to do so. You can have all the requirements of creating a binding oath, but without the intent to enter into it, the oath will not bind. Magic protects and understands those who interact with it. Always respect the sentience of magic. Only a fool would dare to defy it. The four pillars of magic need to be thought of not as singular support columns, as they are all intricately connected. Intent without willpower, creativity, and power is nothing more than an idle thought or actionless conjecture. Without one, they all fail, and it is of the utmost importance to understand this. Magic is a dynamic force that is fluid and not static. There are no set rules for how much of each aspect is required for magic to be undergone successfully. There are basic guidelines, and these explain why the curriculum is structured as it is. With magic, there are multiple branches, and the distinctions for branches of magical study is inherently linked back to the four pillars. Transfiguration is a branch of magic that is most heavily dependent on willpower and creativity. Intent is always required as you are changing the basic structure of an item. Once this base level of intent is achieved, it no longer requires mentioning. Magical power is important in Transfiguration at the highest tiers and most difficult of acts. Though it is akin to the requirement of flour and baking bread. There is a minimum amount needed to be able to bake a loaf of bread, and flour beyond the required amount is of little use. It is willpower that is the dominant pillar. Magic is sentient, and both inanimate and, especially, animate subjects have a natural state of being. Using magic to override their base form requires the willpower to overcome the inherent resistance against change. Magic itself understands the base form, and to successfully overcome that, it requires willpower. Creativity or imagination is paramount to the process, as creating a clear idea of what it will be changed to will reduce the willpower and magical power inputs required for success. Charms, hexes, and curses are all very similar and can be lumped into a single category. Hexes do not require much in the way of willpower or magical power. Charms require more magical power than hexes, and curses require more willpower, and some require more magical power. In general, hexes are easily cast and normally non-damaging. Charms are like the larger older brother of hexes. They are cut from the same cloth but are more difficult to handle. Curses are charms that have been compartmentalized into a new category simply because their intent is to cause harm. A fool would call curses a dark magic and claim they are simply evil. Those with wisdom understand that causing harm is correlated with dark magic or evil acts, but they are not mutually inclusive. Self-defense would fall within the use of curses for a righteous act. The magic behind hexes relies more heavily on intent and creativity than willpower or magical power. Intent is often praised as the most important aspect of magic. In a sense, it is true. Without intent, magic is not possible. In Transfiguration, intent is relegated to a switch. It is either on or off. With hexes, intent mirrors the flow of water. You can intend just a little, like a meandering stream, or you can intend something as strongly as the greatest rivers. Creativity is important again, though, for hexes intent is primarily the catalyst for success. Charms are heavily fueled with intent and magical power. At the height of charms, willpower can make a good charm become great. Creativity and imagination are often thought to make charms masters. There is a fallacy here, though, as most charms masters are imaginative, as they have a wide array of charms that they are capable of using in inventive ways. However, casting the charms themselves requires far less creativity than intent and power. The fallacy is creatively using charms can help one become a master at using the charms, not just casting them. A tongue-tying hex is rather easy to imagine. Freezing water is easy to picture, and, though charms masters are typically creative themselves, using the actual magic requires very little of it in comparison to Transfiguration. Curses are similar to charms, though they do require more willpower. It is easy to lock up someone's legs with a leg-locking hex. It takes internal fortitude or willpower to use magic to remove their legs entirely. Intent is the primary element, as you must intend the actual effect of the magic cast, the secondary being power, as charms can be under and overpowered, with many having a base requirement for successful casting, and the willpower to go through with the act. Willpower bleeds into both intent and power in both charms and curses. All the pillars of magic are intricately connected. The resolve to defend oneself can increase your intent or push our body to exude more magical power into a charm. Harry rubbed his forehead as he finished the paragraph. He was stupefied by the failure of Hogwarts' educational system. Either Salazar Slytherin was a masterful teacher and could write a memoir that taught better than actually living professors a millennium later, or the educational standards had slipped rather far. He was processing the information on the basic pillars of magic and how they interacted with each other. He already had his mind expanded when reading the section on Introduction to Potions. Understanding why a love potion could not create love. Potions could mimic love but not create it. They can create the actions that follow love, like infatuation, but not the original intent. Reading this allowed him to practically think back to his first-year lessons. Not even Flitwick had explained the magical theory like this. They talked about it in very broad strokes in the textbook and in class, only explaining that you had to mean the charm to happen or you had to concentrate hard to make Transfiguration successful. Was this understanding not common knowledge? It was puzzling because it all seemed rather simple now. It made sense why he failed at casting charms when he wasn't really trying in class. Defense against the dark arts was an amalgamation of charms and Transfiguration, with more focus being on jinxes and hexes. Harry had wondered why he was the top student in data and not in charms and Transfiguration. Now it made more sense. In Transfiguration, he concentrated because it was required, but he wouldn't venture to say he used his willpower. He was going through the motions to complete the work and not focusing his willpower on the task. Even the creativity required he'd not done well on because it wasn't clear to him that it was required. Now, though, he understood and began working through the transfigurations that he wanted and found he was far more gifted in the art than he'd ever thought. Harry understood what he needed to do and how to go about doing it now. Charms made more sense as he never used much intent in his studies. Was it really important to be able to cast all the silly charms? He'd not thought so, which meant his intent was lacking. This basic understanding was going to change his entire magical education. He felt like he'd been putting a puzzle together without knowing what the final picture should look like. The picture wasn't needed to complete the puzzle. It just made it substantially easier. He understood how the different parts are supposed to fit together. Harry had already read the part on charms and transfiguration a few times, and he was reading the part that he'd kept skipping. The book had not added new words any longer, and Harry thought it must be because he kept skipping the section on rituals. He'd been told by Dumbledore that Tom Riddle underwent many rituals to become the monster Lord Voldemort. It had taken his humanity and left behind a powerful monster. Harry had no will to follow Voldemort's path, and so he kept skipping the section. He had the choice to skip it taken from him. If he wanted to progress further through the book, he had to read the section on rituals. Eventually, he decided to read it. Learning about them did not mean he had to undergo them. Rituals are an old form of magic and are incredibly dangerous. The risk with rituals is how imprecise they are. To understand the concept, you can compare it to the art of making potions. Both use reagents and have steps to follow to obtain a specific result. In potions, when coming up with a new formula, trial and error are the primary sources. The result of a bad potion can be contained within the potion itself. It can be tested on animals or on humans with their results studied. Through the long process of creating a new formula, unexpected or unintended consequences can be sorted out to bring about the final intended function of the potion. Explosions and melted cauldrons can be stopped by proper safety techniques. The danger in making new potions can be reduced, so there is very limited risk to the brewer. Rituals are like potions, except the magic is contained by the witch or wizard instead of a potion. Any mistakes are borne on the one undergoing the ritual. The practice of rituals has been studied for centuries. It has set formulae to achieve specific results that have been tested throughout the years. The various magical reagents have catalogued properties and interactions. They are dangerous only for the novice who fails to heed the precise nature of them, or to the one experimenting with a new ritual. Rituals require precision and accuracy to be performed correctly. My hubris is where I have failed. Though none alive and none before me are as accomplished as I in the art of rituals, I failed to heed the two truths of magic. The mistakes were minor, and I overlooked the compounding nature of them. Some that have dabbled in the art have tried new rituals that would have brought them power, and their errors cost them dearly. I have seen the effects of botched rituals. From the loss of one's mind, magic, changes that are inhuman, even to the mutilation of one's own humanity. The rituals I will advocate for my future progeny will be of balance and those tested extensively. Rituals are a branch of magic that can be thought of as permanent potions for the witch or wizard. Most rituals have negligible or minor specific effects. There is a hair loss potion, and there is a reciprocal ritual that can make it permanent. Because of their permanence, their effects are often muted. The most powerful rituals are the most dangerous and costly for errors. The same way there are potions too complicated for novices, there are rituals too complicated for those not practiced in the art. Rituals have another drawback in that they are less precise than what is often desired. While the potion for improving one's memory is rather strong, and its effects are short-term, to gain the corresponding result would take no less than 7 rituals. The specific combination that I am aware of is also less precise. The 7 rituals would also add other elements that were not supplied by the potion that is dangerous and unstable. For my heirs, I have designed a series of rituals that are intended to give an advantage over regular adversaries. The designs are specific and must be followed precisely. I have toiled for decades to design a series of rituals for my heirs. Other families have a small series of family rituals that they undertake, and their practices are guarded zealously. I spent much of my early adult life seeking out the mysteries of magic and would do whatever it was necessary to achieve my goals. I have uncovered family secrets that have been protected for centuries. When I boast there is none more learned than I in the art of ritualistic magic, it is not done out of hubris or idly. There is a final risk to rituals that is not as well understood. It is the concept of magical balance. Magic is sentient, and abusing magic has consequences. I cannot overstate or repeat it enough. Rituals are a way to add to your magical potential. There are unnatural acts that bring about the ire of magic. Most scoff and disregard the very idea. Ritualistic magic is where the very vindictive nature of magic can be evidenced. Magic wants balance, and there is also importance to specific signs, sigils, and numbers. With rituals, it is important to not become more than you are able to be, that you do not push the boundaries of the natural beyond where they are found. There are costs for doing so. Numbers also have power. To achieve balance, I have designed a set of rituals that are done for each aspect. 7 rituals for the mind, 7 for physical rejuvenation, 7 for magical rejuvenation, 7 for magical strength, 7 for physical strength, 7 for magical abilities, and 7 specialized powerful rituals. The rituals are designed for enhancing the entire person and not just specific aspects. The 7 sets of 7 rituals are also of the utmost importance. Some families did only 3 rituals, other 7, and a few ever considered either 3 sets of 7 or 7 sets of 3. Finding balance and not accruing side effects is an arduous task for the foremost experts in the understanding of ritualistic magic. The background information is simply not compiled in any single library if it is necessary to move beyond 21 rituals. Decades of accumulating knowledge led to pushing beyond 21 to the next available balanced magical number. 7 sets of 7 rituals. In sheer numbers, undertaking rituals in 3 sets of 3 sets of 7 rituals is the next pedestal of magical balance for a total of 63 individual rituals. One must note that the next balance point is not possible if you have done 7 sets of 7 already. The target of 3 sets of 3 sets of 7 is only achievable to the one who had gone the path of completing 21 rituals. It is the next pedestal of balance for those that undertake the 21. Each set focuses on a specific attribute. Finding 7 rituals that do not clash or have ill side effects is rather difficult. I did try and design such a process but found the expected results to be far too unstable for my liking. The final rituals to reach 13 and 14 became far too easy to err in completing. Those that have gone on to 7 sets of 7, their next pedestal of magical balance would be 3 sets of 7 rituals or 147 individual rituals. I, the foremost expert in the field, toiled for decades to find a way to achieve 49 balanced rituals. Trying to achieve the next pedestal is indubitably inconceivable. Perhaps if my knowledge was copied over and I lived multiple lifetimes, it could be possible for me to consider. I would estimate, at minimum, 5 centuries of experimentation to complete it, as one would have to devise half of the newly required rituals on their own. Balance is a necessity. Completing a 50th ritual would bring imbalance and wreak havoc on the person. How the imbalance affects the person depends on the whole equation. Some will lose control of their magic, others their body or parts of their body, for some, their minds or aspects of it. There is the possibility of varying degrees of all of them, and it is where we can see the sentience of magic. The resulting punishment for being out of magical balance is correlated to their intention. Those who try and gain too much power lose the ability to effectively wield their imbalanced power. Changes to their body and mind are most common. I have seen one that delved too far into increasing the mental faculties and they lost the physical ability to communicate in any way. Incapable of speech and unable to move their body. All their brilliance locked into their own mind. I cannot state it enough. Magic is sentient and magic is to be respected. Potions and rituals. Harry had skimmed the next part, seeing it was a ritual to be undergone by himself. A ritual for his mind. 3 deceased animals. Runes painted in his own blood, and a potion that Salazar had devised were the components of the first ritual. It looked rather simple, but it was also really a precipice. If what he read was true, if he did one, he was obligated to do at least 3 or 7. He did not have the expertise to know if that would keep him in balance with magic, though. That meant he would have to do the whole planned set of procedures. 49 rituals in total, with most completed on the 3rd and 7th days of the week. The book went on to explain further about rituals and how to prepare and undertake them. Beyond the 3rd and 7th days of the week, there were other days of importance. Some required elements that necessitated specific days that were not the 3rd or 7th of the week. The transformation he would undergo doing the rituals would take just less than half a year. 2 per week meant less than 25 weeks. If some weeks included 3, then even less time would be required. Still, it was a decision that he had to consider carefully. Could he trust the memoirs of a man that the murderer of his parents idolized? Could imbalance or abuse of magic be the reason for Riddle to have become a monster? Really though, could he trust the founder? Salazar Slytherin was apparently his ancestor. The memoir made it painfully clear only a blood relative could gain access to his sanctuary. Parseltongue was a blood gift passed down through family lines. The trait was not always active in every family member, otherwise his parents would have had it. Following the path of a man that proclaimed himself as power-crazy did not sound overly prudent. Yet what else was he to do? He had just been put into a death trap of a tournament meant for the best and brightest of each school. Harry was not the best and brightest in Hogwarts. He only had 3 years of magical education versus the 6 years of tutelage the other champions had. He was 2 years away from taking his OWLs, and they were in a year of specialized study beyond the OWLs. More than likely all 3 were raised magical and came into their formal magical education far ahead of where Harry had at the age of 11. Harry was trapped by circumstances out of his control again, and there was nobody in his corner. There was a Dark Lord after him, and his dreams made it clear he was plotting something again. In fact, it was probably his plot to get Harry killed in the tournament. Hopelessness, fear, and an attitude of indifference overtook him. Nobody was going to come and pull him out or save him. His family despised him. His father's best friends were too caught up with themselves to consider putting Harry as their first concern. Dumbledore seemed to enjoy playing games with his life while simultaneously withholding information from him. The professors never listened, helped, or even gave a damn about him. His friends did not care for him like he thought they did. The only one who might help him was a house elf. Dobby was many things but helpful in keeping him alive through the tournament. Harry didn't think was one of them. Deep in thought, he sat behind the desk thinking, his head in his hands. His hands supported by his elbows and his elbows by the desk under them as he leaned forward, ruffling and pulling on his hair as he considered what to do. Resolve boiled deep within Harry. He was not going to let this tournament dictate his life. He was not going to let poor friends and adults ruin his life. He was going to do it because why not? At least if his life was ruined, this time it would be his own choice. If Salazar Slytherin was so bad, why did they let his name stand as a founder? Once he left, they could have removed him or even done it a generation or 2 later. Harry knew he was being naive and possibly making a horrible decision. He just didn't care. At this point, he felt like he was mentally shrugging his shoulders and saying, "What do I really have to lose trying it?" He was being trained by a founder of the school who apparently was his ancestor. Everything he had learned with magic had made him rather impressed. Why not just do it? The book also had not revealed any new information yet, so it was possible that doing the ritual was the only way to continue. It made no logical sense that Salazar's plan was to breed dark wizards. There was no evidence in books like their history of magic texts or in Hogwarts a history that Slytherin was a Dark Lord. From his own book, it appeared that he cared deeply for the children of the school. If he had wanted to be a Dark Lord and kill Muggleborns or take over the wizarding world, why would he have kept his basilisk a secret and hidden away? It would be far more rational to have used the giant snake bread for destruction to make his enemies succumb to his might. XXXXXXXXXX. Harry groaned and tried to open his eyes to look around, but his eyelids were caked onto his face for some reason. His hands reflexively reached to his eyes and rubbed. His fingers found resistance, though they did not encounter sleep in his eyes. The substance was harder, grimier, and crusty. He managed to rub his eyes open and sat up. His legs were laid out straight in front of him with his feet beyond shoulder width, and he was now sitting with his buttocks on the ground and his upper body upright. He looked at his hands and saw they had red on them. Red? That didn't make sense. Oh, it did, now that he remembered why he was laying on the stone surface in the first place. He'd done his first ritual. He closed his eyes again and just focused on breathing and himself. He was seeing if he'd become a Dark Lord. If he had been tricked by an ancient book that was far too sentient for his liking. This section had a mind of its own. It was Saturday, November 7th, and he had completed his first ever ritual. He did not feel and couldn't see either any difference from what he could tell at all. The book indicated it was an incremental change, not a substantial one. Each successive ritual would increase the minor effects as they accumulated and built off each other. The book suggested he would not notice the change at all. There would be a noticeable change between 1 and 7 though. He would not become a powerhouse by completing the ritual sets. It explained he was getting a stronger frame to build off on. In the end, he could achieve more because of them, not that they would make him more. The entire first set was focused on his mind. strengthening his ability to learn, understand, think, plan, retain, sort, and process better. Maybe it was like making changes to a race car. He just upgraded the brakes when the old ones were performing to the maximum needs of the car already. He would not need the new brakes until the rest of the upgrades were done. At this point, the upgraded brakes served no function, but as the other parts came into place, they would. Either that, or he was failing to notice the change and Salazar was leading him down a nefarious path. Before he could exit the room to shower, Hedwig flew in and barked at him. He took the letter from her and walked back across the hall to the study to open the letter. Herr Potter, Gringotts has been expecting a meeting with yourself since your 13th birthday. It was your responsibility to come in then and to take up your position formally as the heir of House Potter. Your legal status has changed this past week and an in-person meeting is required to discuss further details. Make your way to Gringotts in London at your earliest opportunity. A list of services provided by Gringotts is attached. Barfong. Gringotts, London. The list of services was less than he was expecting to see. Banking, investment, currency exchange, warding, curse breaking, and government forms. The first few services were things he was already aware of. Ron's brother worked for Gringotts at a curse breaker, and he had heard of families paying for goblin wards to be put up. It was the last one that caught his eye. Why did they specialize in government forms? Banking, investments, and currency exchange were just natural extensions for a banking institution. At least it was a fair bet to assume that in the Muggle world. The letter was rather direct and abrupt. Get to Gringotts and try and sort out what was going on. There was something he had missed at age 13, and that was unsettling to him. Someone should have told him if there was an important event for him at 13 that related to the Potter family. He stayed in Diagon Alley for quite some time and had gone to the bank to get some gold. They had not told him about anything other than taking him to the requested vault. Harry had finished the ritual, and after a shower, a quick trip to Gringotts would be a good idea. Dobby had delivered the letter, so it might be interesting to see how the mood was in Hogwarts after taking in the news. He could skip out of the chamber and sneak into the Great Hall at lunchtime before heading out of the grounds. With that decided, he went out to put it into action. XXXXXX. It was a fairly simple plan, and it worked well. Showered and dressed in clean clothes, thanks to Dobby, Harry flew his broom up the pipe and discovered something he hadn't expected. When he reached the top, the pipe stayed closed, and he could see what was going on in the bathroom as if the pipe's exit was glass. He could see there was someone in the bathroom, and it was like the Chamber of Secrets knew it could expose its secret and work to protect it. After a while, from what he could see, the bathroom cleared out. It was quite the nice surprise as he could dismount his broom, shrink it down, then cloak himself and check the map to ensure it was a good time to exit. With the map showing nobody nearby and most occupants of the castle heading to, or were already in, the Great Hall, he entered into the castle proper. Quickly he snuck through the corridors undetected and moved behind some of the students heading into lunch to get behind Ron to hear what he was talking about. When he moved towards the Gryffindor table, he had immediately noticed Ron and Hermione were not sitting together. Ron was seated where Dean and Seamus normally sat, and he was amicably talking with them. Harry moved closer to hear. "You put that much on him? Your barmy mate." Dean laughed. "Potter's always had some crazy luck. No way he dies as quickly as Draco is saying. 2 minutes is a long time. Twice as long as that slimy snake is betting." Ron defended himself from his friend's teasing. "I've got him at 7 minutes, but being rescued instead of dying. Smaller and safer odds." Seamus chimed in while the two were bickering across from him. 7 minutes against a bloody dragon. You're the barmy one. Charlie finished Hogwarts, then spent years training to even handle the beasts. Ron disagreed vehemently. "Shush," Dean said, clamping a hand over Ron's mouth. "Thought you said it was to be kept quiet," he admonished with a fierce whisper. Harry backed up slowly with his mind racing. Dragons. The first task had something to do with dragons. Fire breathing, crush you into a pulp with a single appendage. Dragons. He'd been so caught up in his own situation that he had forgotten the fact he had to face a deadly tournament this month. He felt something hard and unmoving behind him. He'd backed up right into the wall. Taking deep breaths, he began to calm himself. Overreacting will just complicate things. He had to get out of the hall quickly. Simmering beneath the worry and panic of having to face an XXXXX beast was further anger and betrayal. His former best friend knew about the dragons and was laughing about how quickly he would die. Like Harry's life was worth nothing to him. Adrenaline was coursing through his veins. A torrent of pent-up emotions yearned to make themselves known in magical release. Harry tore out of the hall towards the grounds as quickly as he could without giving himself away under the cloak. He was moving too quickly to be perfectly invisible, he knew, but he had to get outside. The cool air would help quench his anger and anxiety. Too quickly he moved to get to the grounds. He looked back over his shoulder to see if anyone had seen him or followed him. As he went out through the main doors, the inside of his left knee collided with something moving perpendicular to him. His knee gave out as he put his weight on it and he grunted in pain as he fell to the ground. He felt the inside of his leg flare with pain. Whomever he ran into, the bony front of their knee drove into the inside of his knee and it was hurting badly. Harry groaned, noticing that he was on the steps still and only the upper half of his body was under the cloak now. This was not what he needed. He swore at himself for being so careless and moving far too quickly. He was just so upset though. Buggering hell, he said in frustration as he grasped his knee with his hands and brought it towards his chest for a quick inspection. It was just soreness and would be bruising soon. Nothing a bruise paste couldn't handle later. He just had to get up and get out of here, preferably before he was discovered. Harry quickly got back up and had the cloak covering him. The person he ran into was wearing a Beauxbatons outfit and from what he could see she was standing on one leg holding her knee as well. The impact had hurt her knee as well. She turned her head to see about the person she had run into when she heard him say something. Putting her sore leg back on the ground, she drew her wand. "Whoever you are, reveal yourself," she commanded in accented English. She seemed off-kilter and it seemed obvious why. She'd just run into an invisible person. That would throw anyone for a loop. Harry began limping away as quickly as his knee would take him while ensuring his cloak didn't reveal him any more than his clumsiness already had. He crept down the steps and began moving towards the open lawns. He'd kept his eyes trained on the witch and noticed it was Fleur Delacour herself, the Beauxbatons champion. She still had her wand drawn and cast Hominum Revelio, trying to detect him. She frowned as it did not light him up or indicate he was even there. Harry kept backing away until he was on the lawn and he made for the Whomping Willow. He had thought about using the passage to Honeydukes Cellar, but that passage was more well used. If anyone was watching the passages to see if he was coming or going from the castle, that one would be the first one they would check. Each step on his sore leg brought about a resurgence of the dull pain in his knee. Each step became slightly less painful as he walked off the effects of the impact. He should have apologized or said something. It was rather rude, and if she reported the incident, Dumbledore or his former friends would be able to piece together his presence with ease. It was not something he could do anything about, so he focused on his destination. It was not far to the Whomping Willow, and he levitated a fallen branch to push into the knob, allowing his passage out. Once inside, he was able to take off his cloak and walk normally. XXXXXXXX. Anticlimactic was the feeling Harry had as he was ushered into a private office of his apparent family account manager Bloodfong. A short walk in a tunnel, a trip through Flue to Diagon Alley, and then presenting the letter he received from Gringotts led him to this room. A small office with an old goblin sitting behind the desk. The goblin did not get up for his entrance or even offer a greeting. The distinct impression Harry had was that he was annoying the goblin in front of him. Harry took a step into the office as the door behind him closed. The goblin stopped scratching on his quill after 12 seconds and put it down. "Be seated, Harry Potter," he said, looking up in a rather bored tone. Harry moved forward and sat in the closest chair to the door. It was padded with leather over the wooden seat, and it still found a way to be as unyielding as if it was just sitting on uncomfortable wood. He didn't let the discomfort bother him. "I am Bloodfong, the account manager for the House of Potter. I received your inquiry for assets you are entitled to, held by Gringotts, and that is a rather interesting conundrum." The goblin paused his speech for a moment and looked rather pleased as he saw how interested Harry was in what he was saying. "You are a Triwizard champion in a tournament that has specifically stated you must be an adult to compete in. Therefore, as a competitor, you must currently be a legal adult in the wizarding world. That was rather interesting, Harry thought. It would alleviate his issues with trying to be his own man while others had legal authority over him. He started to think about the implications of being a legal adult when Bloodfang continued. Your status is tied to the competition and the tournament will end prior to your 17th birthday. Your new status can then be revoked or contested because you are not being emancipated as a minor through any legal means, just magical emancipation. Harry's happy countenance ended with that statement and he abruptly asked the two questions that jumped to the front of his brain. What does that mean for me now? And is there a way I can make it permanent? His voice betrayed his desperation. If you'd kindly let me finish explaining, I will cover your questions, the goblin growled at him, clearly perturbed for being interrupted. This means your current status as an adult can be revoked by the ministry or challenged by various persons in the wizarding world. From our understanding, if you are able to achieve the requirements to be an emancipated minor through the normal legal ways, they cannot overturn it. The requirements would have to be completed while your magical emancipation is still in place and the correct legal forms filled out. Bloodfang had paused to let that knowledge sink into the young human's brain. The look on the goblin's face was daring him to interrupt him again. Harry had no intention of doing that to the already hacked-off goblin. Completing your OWLs in wand magic is the basic requirement you have to fulfill. Your status as the only son or daughter of House Potter has taken care of all the other requirements. Bloodfang folded his hands onto the desk in front of him, and Harry took that to mean he had completed his explanation. Just so I am sure of my understanding, Bloodfang, can you confirm which subjects are considered the wand OWLs? That was apparently the wrong question to ask as irritation flashed through the eyes of the green-skinned goblin. The ones that require the use of your wand. Charms, defense against the dark arts, and transfiguration. Harry nodded and felt embarrassed and chastised by the elder goblin. That leads to your interesting status. You are an adult and should be entitled to become head of House Potter. Your status may not be permanent, and I expect the Ministry or Wisengamot to ensure it remains temporary if they are able. Allowing a precedent of a 14-year-old head of house for any reason will not be something they will wish to allow. Harry wanted to ask why and opened his mouth, but a single look from Bloodfang silenced him. As head of House Potter, you are able to sit on the legislature of the Wisengamot, and no member will wish to grant a schoolboy equal status and power to the most prominent members of wizarding society. The Ministry will challenge it for fiscal reasons. House Potter is in a tenuous state. The will of the last head of House Potter has been sealed by order of the Wisengamot. Legally, it is an inactive house as the arrangements for how it will be controlled have not been executed. This results in its inactive status, rendering the Ministry to reap all fiscal benefits from the inactive vaults. When a house dies out without any arrangements left for its assets, the Ministry of Magic gains total control of their assets. House Potter is not extinct, so they cannot claim your vaults. They can claim any profits that should have been going into them. I suspect a deal allowing the will to be repressed by the Ministry was cut, and their benefit was entitlement to your family's profits. The Ministry was taking the money that should rightfully be his family's? They made a deal with the Wisengamot to seal his parents' will? They sealed my parents' will so they could steal my family's money? He asked in outrage. Harry couldn't help himself. He stood up as the rage-filled words left his mouth. Sit down, Mr. Potter. The goblin barked at him equally as loud. The strength of the tone and bite of the words allowed him to comply and fend off his anger. Your father, James Potter, did not execute the will of his father, Charles Potter. Your parents' will could not be executed until the head of House Potter allowed for the will of the officially recognized head of house to be executed. James Potter did not take up his birthright after his father's death, and he was not entitled to anything other than the use of the family assets as the primary heir. Bloodfang's explanation further deflated the ballooned rage he had burning within him. His father had not taken up his duties to lead his family. It was this mistake that led to his family losing wealth. Why? James Potter decided not to take up the position because it was a time of war. The Ministry was in a state of war and legislation was passed that any gold received from inactive head of houses would be used to fund the war. James Potter was one of many that decided to protect his family by helping to fund the DMLE. He could not sign contracts or make decisions on behalf of House Potter. If family member or friend was captured, your family assets were safe from being lost, as he could not take up his position if he was under duress. The decision still seemed suspicious to Harry. There must have been better ways to fund the DMLE and protect the family assets. There was no way that many prominent families took the same action. It was something else he should look into. Sadly, that list was growing longer with little to no progress on striking anything off of it. He recognized as a 14-year-old, he had no business being involved in these kinds of circumstances. You cannot take up your position as head of House Potter until you are legally an adult. You are only magically recognized as an adult. However, you can take up your position as heir. The heir is allowed access to financial records and the family vaults. Harry nodded and collected his thoughts. He'd been thinking of his plan of action. First was staying alive in the tournament. Secondly, the new priority was complete 3 OWLs before the tournament ended, and thirdly, to get control of his family assets. Bloodfang. My understanding is that House Potter is being taken advantage of, and I need to complete the wand OWLs as quickly as possible. Is there any way of improving the position of my house as the heir? Bloodfang sat back in thought in his chair. Thus far in the meeting, he had been seated forward, leaning towards or across his side of the desk. He now sat back deep in his chair with his index finger rubbing the left side of his jawline and his thumb the right side. He looked deep in thought. It was rather difficult to read what emotions he might have going through him for Harry. There weren't any typical human emotional cues to pick out. As the heir, you cannot direct investments, you cannot conduct legal affairs nor even retain a solicitor. And as the heir, you cannot sign any contracts on behalf of your house. Those are the 3 main functions aside from the Wisengamot. Your understanding is correct, and if you look at the Wizarding Directory you should be able to find capable tutors. Harry blinked. Wizarding Directory? What was that? He wondered, astounded at the notion that there was a Wizarding Directory. He knew the Muggle world had phone books with a directory of residential and commercial phone numbers, and yet he never considered the concept could have occurred within the Wizarding world. That led to the second question of how in Merlin's name did he not know about it? Bloodfang opened the top drawer and withdrew some parchment and placed them on the desk in front of Harry. On top of it was a ring, a large green gem in the center with a silver-colored P at the middle. Harry picked it up and examined it closely. Felt magical in his hands. That is the heir's ring for House Potter, a peridot gem with a mithril P on it. Peridot gems are said to have magical powers and healing properties to protect against nightmares. It is also said to instill power and influence through the wearing of the gemstone. It has been in your family for generations, and magical peridot gems are rarely used for heir or head of house rings. Your house is the only active one to do so. To Gringotts' knowledge, it should help protect or warn you against external influences and might foster confidence and charisma. Upon the death of the heir, the ring returns to your vault. That is how I have it, and I took it out in preparation for this meeting. Harry reverently placed the ring onto his finger as he listened to his family account manager talk and explain the properties of the ring. He gently slid it on and couldn't help but let his other hand idly caress it as the goblin spoke. That leaves me with financial matters. Your family should be rather wealthy, but close to a decade and a half of having your incomes go to the ministry has not helped. Compounding that was the sale of most of House Potter's assets into gold. The only investment that was retained was political in nature. Bloodfang gestured to the paperwork in front of Harry, and he looked at it as Bloodfang turned the page. As you can see, you own 30% of the daily profit. The Potters are the single largest shareholder, but you cannot direct or act on it. This also would be yet another reason the ministry will not allow you to easily retain an adult status. Note the paper is barely solvent. That made sense to Harry if they were able to benefit from him not having access to control what the press does or does not say about him. He was aware of the nasty reports done on him after the champion selection. James Potter made a mistake turning your assets into gold because of inflation. Seeing the blank look on Harry's face, he elaborated. In short, inflation is the change in the purchasing power of money. What 1 galleon could buy in 1979 now takes almost 3 galleons to purchase. To put it very simply, things cost more now than they did back in 1979. Your account has not been receiving any interest, and the purchasing power diminishes every year even though the content stays the same. That was rather unfortunate, Harry thought again. Was the purpose of it to try and help fund the war effort? Harry understood that if his wife and family were in danger, using all of your resources to try and protect them would be prudent. Harry knew that he would trade all of his gold to have his parents alive. Financially, James Potter had made mistakes, but morally his actions were not something Harry could fault. Only if he was manipulated into it would there be fault. Harry had a suspicion that Dumbledore's war effort was partially funded by his family, though he had to admit he might have taken the same actions in his father's place. Bloodfong continued on, ignorant of Harry's inner conflict. As the heir, you can authorize purchases with your ring, and you can take out 100 galleons a day. The limit means little for investing, as you would have to come and personally withdraw 100 galleons each day and then instruct me to invest it. The best way to help your house recover is to complete your 3 OWLs. Was there anything else you needed, Heir Potter? The tone of the final question made it clear he had covered everything that was needed from his perspective. Harry knew the aged goblin was not one to have his time wasted. Everything had been direct and to the point. He had given all the pertinent information every time he spoke about anything, being as efficient and effective as possible. Two things come to mind. Where can I get a wizarding directory, and why did Gringotts not inform me of this when I was 13? I came into the bank more than once. Harry questioned as politely as possible, though his voice did trail off as he saw the change in mood from the goblin. He didn't want to upset the goblin that looked after his family account. The account manager did not respond right away. He just stared at the boy for a few seconds before opening a drawer on the desk and reached his whole arm into the drawer, from what Harry could tell. It was hidden below desk height, but it looked like he was up to his shoulder in the drawer. Harry waited until he withdrew something. It was a thin book, though it was full muggle-sized paper in its dimension and bound in leather. Harry couldn't tell accurately, but it seemed to have 50 pages or less. Perhaps 30, he surmised. Here is the wizarding directory. He said it rather gruffly. Mr. Potter, Gringotts is the premier bank in all the magical world, and that is all we are. We do not inform any heirs of their rights when they are 13. We are only meeting today because you asked for an accounting of your full accounts. It was only your odd status in the magical world that led to this meeting. Had you not been magically emancipated temporarily, you would have received a short letter with the information requested. We are a bank. Nothing more, nothing less. With his short rant over and his piece said, he gestured for Harry to leave. Harry distinctly felt his very presence had annoyed his manager. He wondered if it was because the goblin had no way of actually making money with the meeting. He was not authorized to allow his vaults to be invested. He had thought it was interesting that he'd retrieved the heir ring that now adorned his finger. It was somewhat disturbing that he was able to waltz into his vault and withdraw such an important item. Perhaps something to think on. Again, that growing list. XXXXXXXX. After his time at Gringotts and a shopping montage for books, clothes, and anything else he could find that caught his fancy, Harry had returned to the chamber without incident. Dobby was able to continue providing him with dinner, and afterwards, he continued working through his first 3 years of textbooks on charms, transfiguration, and data. He was reworking on the difficult spells he had not mastered the first time. His new understanding of the magical theory behind the spells allowed him to improve his previous spellcasting markedly. This morning he was back to the memoir book and reading further about his next ritual. It was another mind ritual and was to be performed on the 3rd day of the week. What caught his attention the most was what was below it. Intent is incredibly important with ritualistic magic. However, the academic study of intent and its impact on the results of a ritual is profoundly limited. There is virtually no ability to research it, just from the scarcity of knowledge being shared about rituals, let alone the basis for having a way to actually capture the true intent of the person undertaking the ritual. Men can be deceitful even to themselves. What they espouse of themselves and what they truly are do not always match. Some will fail to understand their own real intent. Insecurity could also be the true reason when they themselves truly believe it is for another purpose. Speculation based on a theoretical understanding is the most one could really expect or hope for on the subject. I digress. The intent is important, that is well known. It is the result that is in question, that is what is speculated on. When undergoing a ritual to improve one's mind, the intent on why it was done matters. Is the person doing it simply because they wish to improve themselves in a general sense? Are they trying to do it for conceited reasons of lording their ability over those lesser than them? Magic is intelligent and works towards balance. A wizard strictly trying to gain power for the sake of domination and dominance over others with a malicious intent will find that magic exacts a price. In the last scenario, I can only try and guess as to the price. Power without the ability to use it to its full might may be where the malicious mage could see deteriorating ability. Perhaps their ability to think rationally could be affected. Loss of bodily processes like the over- or underproduction of hormones could occur. Magic could make a myriad of punishing effects. When you, my heir, undergo a ritual, focus on why you are doing it. Find reasons that are just and morally sound and keep those at the forefront of your mind. Magic is sentient. Those users who have nothing but pure intentions may receive wonderful gifts from unicorns, and those who are malicious to them live cursed lives for their arrogance. Never forget, magic is sentient. Harry grumbled how that would have been nice to know before he did his first ritual and essentially locked himself into doing 49 in total. Salazar was a bloody prick for not telling him before he locked himself into his path. A flash on the bookshelf across from him caught his eye. Harry thought he'd seen a quick glow around a book and plucked it from the bookshelf. There was a title on the book now. A Novice's Guide to Charms by Salazar Slytherin. Harry opened the first page and saw the Lumos charm. The instructions on how to cast it were there, as well as modifications to the base charm and exercises to run in order to perfect his control and ability with the charm. Below that there were practical uses for the charm, including a suggestion of uses in combat. Harry didn't even go and sit back down. He just started reading and working on casting the spell. He'd recently gone over it, but now he was being challenged to change the color, shape, brightness, and even have it done silently without wand movements. The book waited for him to master everything before the second page with a new charm showed up. Harry went to the magical practice room across the hall and began to work through the book as best as he could. He had practiced magic nonstop until Dobby brought him food. Even as he ate, he continued reading and practicing the best he could while eating. The world around Harry was changing rapidly, with a manhunt being organized for his safety. His magical guardian, or former magical guardian, Albus Dumbledore, was leading the search. The DMLE had been notified, and it was reported on heavily by the Daily Prophet, with stories lambasting him for his attention-seeking behavior as the fourth champion. They featured interviews with students that were known to despise Harry Potter, particularly Draco Malfoy and Pansy Parkinson, which added fuel to the already inflamed situation. After the second full day of Harry's disappearance from the castle, Dumbledore had initiated a search for him. By the fourth day, he had contacted Amelia Bones to discuss the situation with her directly. He had not wanted to, but McGonagall forced his hand, saying she would if he did not. She was, after all, the one to receive the letter. Sprout had also pointed out in the short staff meeting, where the sole agenda item was about Harry Potter, that Susan more than likely would have already informed her aunt. The major source of the castle's gossip was that the youngest champion had gone missing. The staff knew that this information would have already left the castle. Press coverage on his vanishing began when it was leaked, from a DMLE source, that Harry Potter was considered a missing person. Rita Skeeter, the gossip columnist, lost her exclusivity on writing on the Triwizard tournament for the Daily Prophet. The coverage began speculating, and requests for information from the Ministry of Magic, Hogwarts, and the tournament's organizing committee began in earnest. Coverage of the tournament took a large uptick as well. The three individual events made for rather sparse coverage, and extremely limited access to the actual competitors made coverage rather dull. Plans to cover the event grew from a single reporter being assigned to cover it, to many journalists actively seeking out stories that could be linked to it. With the compelling story of a fourth champion that subsequently snuck out of Hogwarts with its legendary security, there was an ongoing story to cover, which was surprising, considering that most editors of the major European wizarding press firms thought it would only have been 3 major stories with a possible follow-up with the local champion after its conclusion. Perhaps a couple of other minor pieces, but a 3-task tournament over 9 months was rather minimal. The committee's decision to keep the tournament a secret until its official announcement on September 1st killed any opportunity to build awareness and hype with their readers. Interviews of eligible-to-enter students should have been done, as well as months of coverage, investigative reporting, and special interest stories which might have illustrated a better picture of the competition. Instead, access to the champions was limited to just the weighing of the wand ceremony, and all details were kept as secret as possible. The only press agency given access was the Daily Prophet, and not even they were running extensive coverage. Instead of creating political upheaval for a small set of stories for an event most people wouldn't even be expecting to occur, the editors decided to not kick up a storm to increase the news potential for the tournament. That all changed when the most famous underage wizard in the world was named the fourth champion. The boy who lived had kept a remarkably low profile since that fateful night, and the first article of his emergence as a champion hadn't caught the attention of the wizarding world, direct results of the lack of coverage and no announcement ahead of time. Rita Skeeter was also a glorified gossip columnist that few took seriously to actually believe this was actual news. It was the breaking story that the underage champion, who Skeeter reported was an attention-seeking glory hound, had vanished, which brought the scrutiny of the general public. The press had a recognizable celebrity in Harry Potter as the main focus, locked into a deadly tournament that had ties to most of continental Europe in some way, with both Beauxbatons and Durmstrang competing. Having Albus Dumbledore, Chief Warlock, Supreme Mugwump and headmaster of the school presiding the event, it was just too juicy of a story to pass on. With such a broad audience and two of the best-known wizards at the epicenter, a media storm was born overnight. Albus Dumbledore may be the headmaster of Hogwarts, but he is also the supreme mugwump of the International Confederation of Wizards, and it is in this capacity that he was compelled to be accessible to the press of the European nations. Furthermore, the DMLE in Britain had opened an investigation, and the department head, Amelia Bones, would have to comment on the case as it developed. Instead of the scant few stories on the tournament announcement, champion selection, weighing of wands, first task, Yule Ball, second task, final task, and a follow-up with the individual champion comprising the expected 7 stories over 10 months, there were now weekly or daily stories to be followed. The most well-known underage wizard being forced into a tournament that he was 3 years too young to compete in, and his subsequent disappearance, with Albus Dumbledore as a possible culpable party, was just too great a scoop to keep under wraps. Dumbledore was perhaps the foremost wizard in the world, being a well-published academic across multiple fields, the defeater of Grindelwald, the counterpart of Lord Voldemort, the political head of the ICW, and the longtime headmaster of a world-renowned school. Even he did not have the clout to stop the press. The juicy story became an overnight sensation in Britain and throughout nations that now covered the Triwizard tournament. A shotgun approach on coverage began. Harry Potter's disappearance, speculation into the befuddlement of the goblet, crackpot theories, expert analysis. An insatiable appetite for the Triwizard tournament was born. November 7th was the day Harry Potter had ventured out to Gringotts, the 7th day of the week and the date of his first-ever ritual. It was the 2nd day of his disappearance and a day prior to the DMLE marking him as a missing person. The press had wind of his status as a missing person within 24 hours, and on the morning of November 9th, the story broke. The weighing of the wands was scheduled for November 13th, and press coverage of the event was forced to be changed. Every major publication had run multiple stories, the Daily Prophet even having daily articles related to Harry Potter or the tournament since his disappearance was announced. No longer could the organizers allow only a single reporter. The Ministry of Magic was under intense scrutiny for losing the boy who lived. Dumbledore himself felt the pressure, and they had to cave to the demands, lest further conspiracy stories are born. The short ceremony now became a public press event. A podium for each champion to answer questions, as well as a broader audience for the wand analysis. On the 14th, just 10 days before the first task, papers had multiple reports on the weighing of the wands. Foremost in the coverage was the absence of the youngest champion. Dumbledore had to divulge Harry's note that he had withdrawn from Hogwarts at this time. Further, the committee had failed to inform him of the event, as they had only given him information on the date of the first task before he left Hogwarts. Scathing coverage of those revelations followed. The press decried the committee's rampant failures to keep the poor missing boy out of the deadly affair, and then they didn't even disclose all the relevant information properly to him. Leading up to the first task, everyone wondered if Harry Potter was even going to show up to the task. Had he run away? Was he kidnapped? Why had no information or possible leads come forward yet? There were numerous angles for the press to follow up on. On November 16th, it was revealed by Amelia Bones that Harry Potter had been sighted, just once, since his disappearance from Hogwarts. He had been in Diagon Alley, alone on November 7th. Few details were divulged by the director of the DMLE. However, investigative journalism quickly followed up on which shopkeepers had seen him and what they recalled he'd purchased. Questions were raised about his purchase of a new wardrobe. Why would he need a new set of clothes when he had already shopped and picked up his school robes in the summer? The shopkeepers knew Harry somewhat well, as he had spent weeks in the alley the previous summer. Eager to have their time in the spotlight, the shopkeepers had no qualms about reliving all their experiences with the boy who lived. This led to further articles on why such a well-known person was staying in an establishment that was respectable enough but couldn't shake the fact it was still just a dingy pub. The private life of Harry Potter was delved into both by investigators and the press. Albus Dumbledore had kept his extracurricular school activities relating to Sirius Black and Voldemort a secret. The best sources for information on him, Hermione Granger and Ronald Weasley, were protected from the press by Hogwarts. Dumbledore should be thankful for that merciful fact, or his positions of power in the wizarding world could very well crumble away from him. XXXXXXX. The 14-year-old boy staying in the personal quarters of Salazar Slytherin, hidden deep in the bowels of the school, knew none of this. A new way of life had taken hold of Harry Potter. Solitude in Slytherin's sanctum, which was a breath of fresh air to him. No expectations, no bullying, no staring, and just whatever he chose to do each day. Studying magic under the guidance of the freakishly sentient memoirs or personal books of Salazar Slytherin. This quickly became his new favorite thing to do. Reading the teachings of the man and practicing magic took up every single one of his days. Following the guidelines for the rituals and practicing magic were his daily tasks. As he learned and mastered the new material, more became available. Harry had learned the system that the chamber used. There was the main memoir that slowly let out more information. It followed the life or stories about the life of the man, teachings on a plethora of subjects, or guidance for his heirs. New books would get a soft glow of magic when they became available, and the titles would show themselves. The glow also occurred when a title released new pages for Harry to study. So far Harry had only had 4 topics: charms, dada, transfiguration, and runes. Potions was only covered if and when a ritual called for one to be brewed. Harry had completed 6 rituals, all focused on the mind, and was reading up on the next ritual. 5 rituals on the normal 3rd and 7th days of the week, with an extra slotting in on the 13th day of the month. A logbook of the rituals had appeared in the library and glowed when a new ritual was added. Some were added a few days in advance, as preparing for them could require more than a day to do. Potions that had to sit after completion for a minimum specified period of time, parts that had to soak in blood for 3 days, and other tedious tasks that had to be followed. Today he was reading up on the next ritual. It was called the Dragon Power Ritual. The journal had marked it in the 7th column. There were 6 foci for ritual sets on different aspects of either his body or his magic, but the 7th column was marked simply as special. This was the first ritual in this category, and Harry began to read through it. The ritual had good results with a single dragon, but the variation he had been requested to do called for the use of 3 dragons. It theorized 7 dragons would have a more powerful effect. Having 7 dragons in close proximity to perform the ritual was, as far as Salazar knew, never tested. Wild dragons do not congregate in such large groups, so even the likelihood of finding 3 altogether in the wild was a pipe dream. Yet, the ritual was calling for Harry to use 3 dragons of different breeds. He had to mark them with runes drawn in his blood mixed with a complicated potion. On top of drawing runes on the dragons, he had to drink some of each of their blood as the final step before activating the ritual. A preliminary ritual would take place here in the chamber, which would prepare his body and magic to accept the draconic influence. The second stage was linking the 3 dragons to him through the blood. His blood on them and their blood within him. The next step of the process was to return to the prepared ritual room and activate the second part. The book was not perfectly clear on the exact effects it would have on him. Being considered a special ritual in the journal had him wondering about its effects. The obvious question for Harry, though, was where the bloody hell would he find 3 dragons? His mind had made the connection that it was supposed to be done on November 24th, the day of the first task and coincidentally the 3rd day of the week. It was also his 7th ritual. Given the importance placed on 7 sets of 7, Harry wondered if that made a difference as well. He knew that he was a complete novice and was essentially walking down this path utterly blind. For all he knew, he was on the path to becoming a Dark Lord. It may have been where Voldemort had started his path to insanity. He knew for certain that Tom Riddle had found the chamber and had commanded the basilisk found within. Was it possible that he had bungled a ritual? Salazar had written it over and over to not forget magic was sentient. How did that transfer to rituals? Intent was of paramount importance, so how did it affect rituals? Thinking back to the unicorn example, Harry knew that powdered horn was used in healing potions and hairs were used in wands. He thought he'd heard the hairs could also be used in bandages, due to its strength, but he wasn't certain on that. He'd not really seen any bandages used in the wizarding world that would require strength. The types of injuries he had sustained may just have not required it. He had not heard of any further uses, so he was left with a couple of underlying points of data. Unicorn's parts were used for healing, defense, and strength for the pure uses. Drinking a unicorn's blood that was forcibly taken would curse the person, or so he'd been told. The intent of the use made all the difference. Applying that to rituals, if the ritual was used in a way that was consistent with stealing a unicorn's blood and harming them, then would the ritual curse the person? Harry pondered that for a moment before he found a minor flaw. When Quirrell drank the unicorn blood, he did get his intended result. Kept him and Voldemort alive. They gained the result they wanted, but they were punished for their abhorrent act by magic. They received a strength at the cost of being cursed. He had died shortly after, rather painfully, and there might have been side effects Harry was simply unaware of. It seemed unlikely that the aged headmaster would give up any kind of gruesome details to an 11-year-old. Was his gruesome fate linked to the unicorn blood curse? Could it be that the curse was what burnt him when he sought to damage something else that was also pure, like an 11-year-old child? Dumbledore had said it was a remnant of his mother's protection that hurt Voldemort. Was he honest and truthful or spinning a web of lies? Maybe he was just keeping ugly details from the mind of a boy who just went through a traumatic experience. Perhaps the situation and its concepts could apply to ritualistic magic. Voldemort undergoing rituals for the purpose of hurting others, subjugating them, and ruling over all others. The 16-year-old Tom Riddle he had met in the chamber was a cruel and twisted teen. Though he was still human. His humanity may have been warped, but there was no denying it was still there. The Voldemort he met in first year was deranged, and the memory of him from the Dementor-induced night of his parents' murder was no longer fully human-looking. There was no way Harry should have survived either encounter. Quirrell could have simply killed him with a single spell as soon as he had the stone. He could have blasted him with a single curse the second he appeared. Voldemort knew he had it, and instead of just ensuring his victory, he acted illogically and allowed Harry Potter to destroy his host. If Harry was the Dark Lord hiding under a turban, as soon as he knew the stone was retrieved, he would have killed the witness and made a quick escape. There was no reason to toy with Harry or act as he had. The boy who caused his vanquishing would have been dead, and he would have been immortal with the potential for limitless wealth. Provided he escaped with the stone, and the stone did all it was purported to do. Even at 16, Tom Riddle was making odd choices. He had a wand and could cast spells. Instead of releasing the basilisk, why would he not have just done the deed himself? Playing with his prey allowed Harry the opportunity to stop him and his pet snake. Would Riddle have seen it that way? Was it the magic of the rituals affecting him, making him powerful, smart, all the while extolling a subtle price for his intentions? As a novice, he knew he would not reach a definitive answer. The constant reminder by Salazar's memoir just often made him think about it. Tom could have gone the same path as Salazar hinted of his hope for a true heir. Instead, he was like Salazar's first son, a young man that wanted power and foolishly went after it. What did that say about Harry himself? He was willingly following the path of a man who made that mistakes first. Could he have truly learned enough to prevent it? The magic that made up the chamber and that was training him seemed far too precise to be done by a person who had lost their mental faculties. The point of argument still stood, though. Could the one who had fallen to his quest for power be trusted to lead Harry in a better direction? The best source of information on Salazar Slytherin were his memoirs, and how could he know they were honest reflections and not a cunning conniption to propagate future followers of his dark plans? There was a lingering sick feeling that he could be on the path to becoming the same 16-year-old boy he met in his first foray into the mythical sanctuary he now called home. Harry knew that Riddle and he were somewhat alike. Dumbledore had admitted it. Both were orphans with a rough childhood. Isolated from their peers, Riddle a Muggle raised in Slytherin and Harry a Muggle raised and at odds with his housemates. Both were ostracized for events out of their control. They were both gifted magically, with Harry having realized it when Lupin explained most teenagers did not have the ability to produce a corporeal Patronus charm, let alone adults and even some Aurors. Dumbledore had said it was their choices that made them different. From the evidence Harry had seen, Harry suspected Riddle took in the same teachings he was now undergoing. Would there be a crossroads that would separate the two? Was it all based on the intent behind the magic? Riddle's cruel, sadistic, and ambitions of grandeur. Harry hoped his true intentions were nobler. This time, he was not descending into the chamber to save his best friend's little sister from a monster. Those were noble intentions, though he could reason they were not fully noble because Harry had not wanted the school to close. If it did, he'd be stuck back with his relatives instead of just for the 2 months that the school wasn't in session. Harry had different ambitions now. He wanted to be able to protect himself and those he cared about from enemies. He wanted to be himself and not some moniker given to him for some fluke of magic or for something his parents had done to protect him. He wanted to be himself and control his destiny. He needed to get himself into a position that allowed him to be independent, free from Dumbledore and the Ministry having control over him. Under Dumbledore's watch, he had almost died every single year. And now, this year, he was in a tournament meant for the best and brightest students who were completing their final year of education. Harry knew Cedric was one of the top students in the entire school. Every time a Hufflepuff was looked down upon for being in Helga's house, Cedric Diggory and Amelia Bones were the two ready-made examples of proving Hufflepuffs were not hard-working dunderheads. Cedric was pretty well Mr. Everything. Seeker on the Hufflepuff team, son of a prominent ministry worker, and from an old family. He was supremely talented, hardworking, fair, honest, and popular. Harry, a student with half the magical education and Muggle raised on top of that, was supposed to compete at his level. Dumbledore hadn't even tried to find a solution to his entry. He'd just accepted it like it was somewhat expected. The headmaster had shown surprise when the fourth name came out. Harry had seen that, and yet he'd done nothing to assist him. Harry had told him and Sirius about his dream about Voldemort, and they'd done nothing. Year after year his life was in danger and they did nothing. Harry would consider the Ministry of Magic, but it was common knowledge that the minister's funding for his political interests had private funding from Lucius Malfoy, the man that had tried to kill him after his second year. The man that had given a cursed diary to an 11-year-old girl, and new attacks were going on in the school his son was living at. The same minister who said that they must be seen to be doing something when they threw another innocent person into a prison that was tantamount to prolonged and ceaseless torture. No, Harry's path to independence and protecting himself would have to be wrought from his own actions. It is why his intentions were not fully pure. Perhaps there wasn't much of a price for his ascendance towards greatness. He didn't want this to change him. He still valued friendship, and his real goal was to have a family that loved him. A family he would sacrifice himself for, like his parents had done for him if it was necessary. He was only 14 and didn't have any business or political goals. He barely even knew about anything in either topic in the magical world. There was no scheme for economic, political, or magical power to enable him to control the wizarding world. Discerning his true intentions for undertaking ritualistic magic was downright troubling. Troubled, this led Harry back to his original problem: locating 3 dragons. None of the other rituals had been difficult to find ingredients. In fact, Dobby had found some of them already prepared within the chamber or in Hogwarts. Harry had gleefully known some must have come from the potion stores or from Snape's personal stores. Harry sat back in the chair and began to think of how Hogwarts and dragons could be related. The only thing he could come up with from his past was the incident in his first year. Could Hagrid have acquired 3 dragons? The ritual called for 3 adult dragons to be used. The proverbial light bulb went off in his head, and he realized it must be for the first task. The painful conversation he'd done his best to forget when he overheard his former best friend in the Great Hall flooded his mind again. Harry only had 2 days before the first task to check his theory, prepare for the ritual, and then come up with a strategy for whatever the task was. He'd gotten so wrapped up in his newfound freedom and the pursuit of magical knowledge, he now had just 2 days in advance to prepare to be competing against dragons. A thought broke to the forefront of his mind that chilled all the others. How had the book that was recording and preparing him for rituals known about the first task and that they were going to be using dragons? Was it a haphazard coincidence of happenstance? That the seventh ritual would always be the dragon power ritual? Harry didn't know how to react. It was already rather unsettling how sentient the chamber was. Harry had discreetly tried to look for portraits. It was the best idea he had so far that there were hidden portraits that watched and set up the entire curriculum for him. It was far too responsive. If Salazar had been able to set this up before he died, why wouldn't this school have had some kind of function like it somewhere else? History of magic could easily be taught this way. The most unsettling part, before the dragon coincidence, was the immediacy of how things occurred. How he'd finish reading a book and then a moment later another would light up for him to continue his studies. It was best not to think about that again. He only had 2 full days to prepare, and so he grabbed the ritual book to see exactly what the dragon ritual was. He wanted understanding as to why it was marked in the 7th category. This dragon ritual is based upon the understanding that dragons are magical creatures. Many beasts have magical properties, and yet they should not be considered magical creatures. The dire wolf is an example of a great beast that has been deemed to be magical. A dire wolf is simply a regular wolf that has gained magical properties. Magic has allowed the dire wolf to gain size, strength, intelligence, and, dependent on which researchers one believes, various degrees of magical traits. At one end of the research pendulum is the understanding that they have a base resistance to magical attacks and that their ability to blend into their environment is a form of magical camouflage. On the other end is the understanding that their natural strength is augmented by magic, their camouflage abilities are enhanced by magic, and their hide gains magical resistance. The distinction is magic enhances nature versus magic adding new magical traits. Regardless, the point of the matter is dire wolves are mundane wolves that have gained magical properties. Dragons are beasts that are not simple mundane creatures that have gained magical properties. A dragon cannot exist without magic. Stripping the magic from the dragon ends their life. They are a being of magic. Their robust scales, immense size, small wings, and internal flame cannot exist without magic. Dragons are one of the few species of beasts that are born of magic. Dragons, phoenixes, unicorns, and basilisks are the 4 well-known magical creatures. Most of the beasts that are improperly named as magical creatures are the results of magical experimentation. Thestrals, hippogriffs, minotaurs, chimeras, and griffins, for example, all have their roots in wizards and witches experimenting with magic. The animagus transformation is one avenue of finding infallible proof, while the uneducated will wrongfully interpret the results. It is a well-known fact there are no magical creatures for anyone's animagus form. The general explanation is that it is not possible, however, this is a falsehood. There are 2 aspects to the general understanding that are errantly combined. The first is magic does not recognize the experimental magical creatures as options. They are bastardizations of magic. Only one that has an equally bastardized form of magic could become one. Theoretically, a wolf animagus could similarly abuse their magic to what turned a regular wolf into a dire wolf. Theoretically possible, but practically impossible. One cannot change a human soul as easily as one can change the soul of a mundane beast. There is another aspect that is misunderstood that is related to this topic that I will explain. The distinction between beasts with magical properties and magical creatures is important to the generally accepted fact that magical animagus forms are not possible. The human body is not infused with enough magic to allow it to become a true magical creature. True magical creatures are beings born of magic with every single part of their being deeply infused with magic. Their body parts are so instilled with magic that they are some of the most potent potions reagents available. Many possible reagents are simply unsuitable as their powerful latent magic creates volatile reactions with other ingredients that are incredibly difficult to devise a way to stabilize. There are no healing potions with Phoenix Tears because they simply overpower any potion and act with their normal use as if they were not a part of the potion. They destabilize any potion they have been added to, leading to the tears being used directly when available. Their potency is so strong the tears override any intent to change or modify their magical properties. Theoretically, it is possible for a wizard to become a magical animagus. My supposition is if one had a high enough level of magic infused into their body, they could become a magical creature. There is the inherent understanding that their soul would have to be compatible with the magical animagus form. Even if one was able to transform into a magical creature, I expect the true magical abilities would not be fully accessible. Infusing enough magic to become a magical creature is the first step and is only theoretical. Performing magical abilities would take high levels of magic. Perhaps if one was able to become a phoenix, they would be able to fly as the majestic bird does, and perhaps even gain tears that heal to some minor capacity. It is doubtful they would ever be able to gain the prized abilities of flame travel and being reborn from their own ashes. The base level of magic required for those abilities is far beyond just being able to take their shape. Given the size and levels of magic required, I would postulate it would not be possible to become a dragon or a basilisk. A unicorn would be at the very point of meeting between theoretically possible and most practical. It was thought that Merlin could turn into a phoenix, but it was him simply taking the form of the bird and not having any of its magical abilities. A magical form of Animagus, but not a real magical creature. This leads to the effects of the dragon ritual. The first stage of the ritual is preparing your body to allow the vast magical potential of a dragon to be taken into your body. Infusing your body with the dragon's magic can have a number of effects. True magical creatures have a few things in common. They are incredibly durable against physical, mental, and magical attack. They are incredibly potent magically. For example, the venom of a basilisk is far beyond any other form of snake venom, including those that have gained magical properties for their venom. Beyond durability and potency is their magical abilities. Dragons can fly with wings that physically could not support their weight. They can breathe fire and are a mobile and impregnable fortress of destruction. Each magical creature has magical abilities, and it is possible the wizard that undergoes the ritual to gain a magical ability. Though the level of infusion of magic would more than likely require 7 dragons in the ritual based upon my experience of a single dragon. Do not expect to be able to breathe fire, fly, or have armored skin. From my own use, I noticed a few changes. Most noticeably my changes were that found more in the improvement on the physical level. Strength, limited durability, improved senses, and reaction times, all with varied rates of increase. On the magical side, there was perhaps a change in how sensitive I was to magic. I felt I could feel magic to a greater degree. It was not like lighting a candle in a dark storeroom. The change was more akin to adding an additional candle to a room that already has some lit. There is a change when looking for it, but it was not a stark difference. As for my mind, I did notice a greater change there. Upon reflecting, I became more confident and sure of myself. It must be what it feels like to be a dragon. To know you are the apex predator and there are none greater than you. I was already a powerful wizard, both fierce and feared. Could have been natural, or perhaps it was the dragon magic. The exact changes one undergoes has too many factors to conclusively predict, especially as intent plays a part. What is known about those that have used this ritual is that it is one of the few that I have placed in their own category. Most rituals cannot be noticed by themselves. Only within combinations will there be any kind of change that is noticeable to the wizard. The dragon ritual has the potential to be impactful enough that it can bring about as much or greater change than a set of rituals. There is very little that is precise within ritualistic magic. The breed of dragon, its age, sex, and personality are just a few characteristics that mold the results, let alone taking into consideration how they blend with the intent of the wizard, the aspects of the target, and even how many dragons are being used. When more than one dragon is used, how they are all mixed together matters as well. The only true guide can be found by understanding the areas where change can occur and your own intent for the ritual. Accurately predicting the results would take weeks of endless study. Infusing your body with magic is how one becomes more powerful in a literal sense. There are no stores of magic kept within a person. Wizards and witches have the ability to use and absorb magic. They are able to interact with it and creatively use it in various forms. There is no storage in a literal sense. There is no extra organ or space where magic is synthesized, processed, or even stored. Instead, each wizard is infused with magic. Those that are more powerful are able to saturate and channel more magic through their bodies. The purpose of the dragon ritual is to gain aspects of their ability and to oversaturate your body with magic. Dragons are beings made of magic and far surpass any level of saturation by a human. Power is a mixture of saturation and the ability to channel magic through the body. In short, how much body your magic can handle inhabiting it and how much can be channeled through it. The dragon ritual is meant to aid in both aspects. Magic is a truly wonderful thing. Taking in magic from a sentient creature you connect to is a powerful undertaking, and be sure your intent is pure. XXXXXXXX. Harry could feel the adrenaline coursing through his body. This is the first crazy adventure he was voluntarily getting into because it was going to solely benefit him. No Hermione to rescue from the troll. No dragon to smuggle out for Hagrid. No legendary artifact to protect from a madman. No gigantic snake to battle to save Ron's sister. No giant spiders to seek out for Hagrid. And no Dementors to drive off to protect his and others' souls. This was the first ludicrous activity that he was going through with at Hogwarts that no sane person would expect a 14-year-old boy to be caught up in. Yet here was Harry Potter, ready to enact the plan he had come up with. He'd scouted the dragon's handlers under his invisibility cloak and found out a key detail. The Ministry had wanted to ensure the dragons were well rested for the task to put on a good show. They were to be put to sleep the night before. The handlers had laced their dinners with sedatives strong enough to force the dragon to sleep through the night. The handlers were all heading to bed early to be as prepared for the task the next day. They expected to have ornery dragons. Forcing them to sleep while they were watching their clutch of eggs was a terrible idea. No matter how many times they explained it, the official refused to not accept any other course of action that was not their own. That led to the current state of affairs. Every dragon handler in bed with alarms set to wake up 2 hours before the dragons were expected to wake up at 10 a.m. The task was to start at 11 a.m. and they would be waking the dragons up at 10 a.m. They would all be irate and extra defensive of their clutches. They were not looking forward to their alarms going off. Every one of the 12 Dragon Preserve employees was bunkered down in their tents and sleeping or preparing to sleep. Harry Potter was lurking outside the temporary dragon enclosure. He'd overheard their plans and was going to add his own to them. If he could pull this off, it would be quite the heist. Fate seemed to be working for him this time, and not to screw him. He'd discovered that there had been a potion invented specifically for keeping dragons asleep. To brew it was a newt level or beyond newt level potion. He'd followed the exact instructions of the book and thought it had come out fine. He did not want to trust that the dragons he was painting his blood with were not going to suddenly come out of their nap time and fry him to a crisp. Harry cast the basic detection charm for sensing if there are wards. He was grateful the tents were not warded. He hadn't learned anything yet about dismantling or any ways to overcome even basic wards. He'd been told outright destroying them would be an option. For a stealth mission such as this, it was not feasible. Harry crept into the first of the 2 tents and saw it was much as he was expecting. A magically enlarged tent. He walked into the entrance that led down 2 steps into a sunken sitting area that was complete with couches, armchairs, and a lit fireplace. He slowly made his way down 2 steps when he realized a mistake he had made. He'd forgotten to cast the charm to detect how many human souls were within the immediate area. The more power he put into the charm, the greater the distance it would cover. When he first learned the charm, he remembered the French champion had used it when he was under his cloak. What did not make any sense was the incongruity between what the book stated and what he had experienced. Salazar's book was very clear. The charm would reveal even those found under invisibility cloaks. Wizards had no method to defeat the simple charm. It was an infallible, an inerrant and impossible to trick charm. The result should have been blatantly obvious. Harry was the only person to have ever survived the killing curse. The curse was inerrant, infallible, and if it made contact with you, death was the only result. That was until young Harry Potter had it cast on him. Now he was not revealed by a charm that detects human souls. What did that mean about his soul? Had the killing curse done something to his soul? There was that growing list. Harry had never even heard of soul magic before. There was no elective class for it at Hogwarts. Another mystery that was simply beyond him and had no bearing on his immediate future. His left foot skipped the first step and he moved onto the top step on the far side of the shrunken living room. The kitchen was off to his left, but he was unconcerned with it. The charm had told him there were 6 persons ahead of him. There were 3 doors and that meant 2 to a room. Harry slowly made his way down the hallway as quietly as he could. He'd never been so thankful for sneaking around the castle and at the Dursleys before that. He snuck his way into the room and cast Sonimum silently. that had taken some practice to learn how to cast his first ever silent spell. It was less work than he expected because he understood why it was more difficult. It was said to require more focus and wasn't done until the newt level classes. By removing the verbal and mental cues from spell casting, the caster often failed to supply the intent and willpower required. It took some time to figure it out and become comfortable to go into this kind of undertaking. Harry was not certain of how legal rituals of this nature were, but he was willing to wager his entire trust vault that this specific one would be deemed illegal. That did not bother him, and neither did casting silent sleeping charms for dragons on the 2 dragon handlers. They were situated in a bunk bed with each man lying down on the mattress. Whether they were asleep or not didn't matter. 2 very fast spells while he was still under his cloak and he was ready to go. He'd put enough power that he thought they shouldn't wake for a couple of hours. Beyond that, he had no way to really gauge. It wasn't like he'd ever run around casting silent sleeping charms on men that were already sleeping beforehand. Harry continued on to the next 2 rooms, and though his blood pressure would infer he was in an extremely dangerous event, it was rather anticlimactic. None of them were expecting a Triwizard champion to break into the supposedly secret temporary dragon preserve and to incapacitate the handlers. It was all over in less than 10 minutes of him entering camp. Now came for the part he was less sure of. He'd be exposed inside the pens as he began to make his way out of the final tent. This tent held the more senior staff members. There were 4 rooms instead of just 3. Walking past the coffee table, he saw something that piqued his interest. There were 4 lifelike renditions of the dragons that were outside the cages. He saw they were miniatures of the actual dragons. Harry looked at them and quite liked the Hungarian horntail miniature. He decided it would make a nice desk ornament in the chamber. He pocketed it without guilt and made his way out of the tent. The air was frigid and fresh. It smelled of old tree growth and tickled his senses with the hint of the winter that was to come. The cold air surrounded him as he made his way into the first dragon pen. He'd researched the 4 dragons and decided to use the Hungarian horntail, the Chinese fireball, and the Swedish shortsnout. The most deadly dragon in existence, the scarlet-colored reptile known as the lion dragon, and thirdly the gorgeous silver-blue dragon that was agile and the one that could throw out blue-hot flames. He'd thought them a good mix. A lion-like dragon, the most feared and combative dragon paired with an agile, blue-hot flamed dragon that was reclusive by nature. The common Welsh green was more of a sheep-eating docile dragon. Its calm demeanor and general lackadaisical nature did not appeal to him. It would be skipped as the ritual only required 3. He'd practiced the runes he had to draw on the dragons in his own blood tirelessly. He could do them blindfolded without any issues. The blood he had simply siphoned out the previous afternoon, as it would take around 2 quarts per dragon. It worried Harry that he would be losing so much blood until his brain kicked in and he realized he could simply use a blood-replenishing potion. His Muggle upbringing really hindered the thought processes that most wizards would have. In some ways, that was good, as it allowed him to think differently than magically raised children, and there were times where it sorely hindered him. An exhausted Harry Potter made it back to the chamber by 2 a.m. to engage the next part of the ritual. XXXXXXX. When Harry's body finally recovered from the ritual, it was 8 hours later, just as the book had predicted. The worst discovery, upon waking, was the incredible pain he was in. His entire body had been infused with the foreign magic, and it had incredibly painful results. When he activated the connection between them, he felt like his body was bathed in fire. He knew there was no warning of it in the instructions for the ritual. Was it left out so that he wouldn't have second thoughts about performing it, or because something went wrong? Either way, it hurt beyond anything Harry had ever experienced. He was used to pain and had a rather high tolerance for it. All of the previous experiences paled in comparison. It was like every cell in his body was on fire and it knocked him out. He could not stay conscious with that level of pain. Thankfully, he had planned ahead and Dobby helped him like usual. As quickly as he could, he scarfed down the meal Dobby provided and completed his morning rituals. The pain relief potion that he'd taken prior to his meal had thankfully kicked in. Each minute, the after effects of the ritual were lessening, and if the rate of change continued, he would be right as rain in no time. Harry made his way back towards the bedroom so he could look for a robe that would be ideal for today. Dobby had been delighted to be allowed to take on such an arduous task. It still amused Harry to see how excited he got by the prospect of work. Harry stood in the walk-through closet and asked for Dobby. Dobby, is there any kind of outfit fit for combating a dragon? It was kind of a shot in the dark, but maybe Dobby had found something. He'd already come through with a moleskin pouch for discreetly and safely storing items. He'd no longer go anywhere without this invisibility cloak that could, somehow, fully hide his presence. Storing even the map on him would be prudent too. Harry had not explored all the clothes. Others might have. He cared rather little for clothing. Dobby put outfits out for him to wear every day anytime he required it. Harry hadn't asked him to, and he appreciated it. Dobby hadn't responded verbally, he had just popped away without comment. A few seconds later, he reappeared with a new set of clothes in hand. Harry thanked the little elf and looked at what had been procured for him. He was able to easily identify a set of black dragonhide boots with silver finishings. There was a dark green set of pants that were so dark they appeared black except under light. There was a light black undershirt to go over his bare skin with a set of robes that matched black and silver boots in parts and his pants in others. Harry ran his hand along it, and there were perceptible differences in the materials. Very fine and small scales that may have been from a dragon. There were smooth portions that felt like a cool brisk stream. Those portions he safely thought were acromantula silk, and the final portion almost felt like an odd mixture between the two. It wasn't standard muggle leather, he knew that much. A snakeskin? Basilisk hide, or just part of it? It was an outfit that came from this closet and was better than wearing his simple Hogwarts robes. Harry slowly changed out of his clothes and put these on. He'd never considered clothes before, and now he felt that was an error. His plain school robes and hand-me-downs did affect him. Unconsciously, he was embarrassed by his shabby attire. He did not care how expensive or if they were from a well-known designer. The error was that he'd never felt this good before. These were well-made, tough, durable, fashionable, and incredibly comfortable. Though he didn't notice, his chin was held just a little higher. Harry checked himself again. He had his moleskin pouch, which Dobby had provided, and it contained his wand, the map, his cloak, and his firebolt. He realized he should consider putting in some basic potions as well. He squared his shoulder, brought his chin up and strode, with purpose, to go and face the first task. He'd looked the part, he felt the part, and he would perform the part up to his expectations today. It had only been a couple of weeks, but Harry felt different. He was preparing for what was to come and take the reins of his life back under his control. XXXXXXXX. Harry was not expecting to see what he was experiencing now. There was far more to this tournament than he had expected. Harry made up his mind to head towards the stadium, under his cloak, and try to find out where he was supposed to show up. The throngs of people showed that there were far more than even the end-of-season Quidditch games that were packed with parents, scouts, and friends. There was a buzz in the air, and apprehension festered through the atmosphere. Harry did his best to make his way towards what he overheard as being termed the Champion's Tent. It was not hard to find, as it was a massive tent off to the side of the new temporary stadium. Harry made his way to the Champion's Tent quite easily. The place was crowded by people, and all were being barred entry. Harry found a hidden spot and took off his invisibility cloak, putting it back into his moleskin bag. Harry slipped his way through until he got to the entrance, where there was a witch. Not just any witch though, one in aura robes that had eye-catching pink hair standing guard. Harry made his way right to her. She stood tall, impeding his entry. "Hey! Nobody but the champions and those authorized are allowed in. Move away or you will be forcibly removed," she said in a clear, commanding voice that was touched with irritation, obviously stemming from having to say it over and over to anyone trying to gain unauthorized entry. Harry grinned a little and responded facetiously. "Are champions allowed in?" He expected her to bite back at him, be sarcastic back, or even apologize. Harry wasn't ready for her response. She grabbed his upper arm forcibly and pretty well threw him forward into the tent, abandoning her post. "Director! Director!" she called out and pulled him along to another female in aura robes. This one gave off quite the presence. Auburn hair, middle-aged and with a monocle in one eye. She gave a quick once-over of the pink-haired female that had dragged him into the tent and then raised her eyebrows at seeing him. That was the only noticeable change in the seemingly unflappable woman. "Good work, Cadet Tonks," the older witch said without taking her eyes off of Harry. She quickly barked out a command. "Return to your post, Cadet Tonks." Her eyes flicked off him for a second as she made eye contact with the pink-haired cadet and gave her a simple nod. Harry wasn't really sure what was going on with the auburn-haired witch. She was a director of the Oars? "Mr. Potter, I am Amelia Bones, the director of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement. Please follow me." It may have been phrased politely, but Harry knew this a command, and she was not a witch to cause any issues with. Harry had no real choice but to follow her. Amelia briskly marched to the side compartment of the entrance of this massive tent. The tent was originally meant to be used for the tournament organizing committee and the Triwizard champions. Due to the extenuating circumstances and the ongoing saga of the missing boy who lived, the tent was massively upgraded and was now a mobile command post. She led him from the room that her Aurors had taken over this morning and into the section she had claimed as her own office. She needed to conduct an interview with the teen as quickly as possible. Her task would be far easier without any form of outside interference. Tonks spotting the young man before the press or Hogwarts staff was beyond fortuitous. Harry followed the witch into a room that had a desk with a lot of paperwork on it. There were half a dozen paper airplanes in a holding pattern circling the office as well. He watched her motion with her wand as she conducted the paper airplanes to unfold back into flat parchment and sort themselves neatly into a pile directly in front of the chair she was in. She beckoned him to sit in one of the two chairs facing her. Harry watched as she directed her wand at a piece of parchment, and she quickly wrote a short note before casting a spell she did not verbally intone, and it folded itself into a paper aeroplane before zoomed out of the room. She then quickly skimmed the paperwork that were previously paper airplanes. He wished he knew what was going on. Why would he need to talk to the director of the DMLE in person before he was allowed to compete? Did the investigation into his being named champion actually find out what happened? Harry was marveling at the woman as she worked with a single-minded purposefulness. She wasn't distracted by anything and not even given cursory glances to him. He felt she was keenly aware of him, and if he made any sort of threatening maneuver, she'd respond lightning quick. Harry didn't know what to do with himself, so he tried to stay calm and sit watching her work. Did they know he had done the dragon power ritual? That was his chief concern, but he tried to use the calming exercises he had learned recently. They were exercises for calming his mind to begin occlumency exercises each day. While Harry was waiting, for a total of 2 minutes, Amelia Bones was reading the latest reports from her department. There was only one good thing about this morning, and that was the healthy-looking Harry Potter in front of her. Amelia looked up as Harry caught the movement in the entrance to the office he was sitting in. Coming in through the door was the headmaster of Hogwarts, Albus Dumbledore. He looked irritated until his eyes saw Harry Potter sitting in front of Amelia's desk. She had just summoned him in a way he did not appreciate, regardless of what was going on, especially on catastrophic mornings like this one. Before either male was able to acknowledge one another or even say something, she got things started. "Now that your magical guardian is here, Mr. Potter, we can begin. This is an informal questioning into the matter of the missing person case for Harry James Potter. The conversation is being recorded by Dictaquill, as you can see to my right." Harry swiveled his head back to see there was a quill working independent of human hands, and it was writing out word for word what was being discussed. "Is this really necessary, Amelia? Harry is in good health. We can shut the case and I'll take charge of him," he said with aplomb after transfiguring the chair beside Harry into the chair he had in his own office. He adeptly sat into his throne-like high-backed chair. "Excuse me, but what is going on here? Why am I being questioned?" Harry interrupted quickly. Both adults focused on him. "Mr. Potter, you were reported missing by your magical guardian and have not been located by any volunteer or law enforcement agents seeking to locate you. You were blocked from any form of communicating with you, and your disappearance has been the major media story in the wizarding world. Once you failed to show up to the weighing of the wand ceremony, your case was escalated." "I was reported missing?" Harry asked, rather confused by the information bomb he was just given. Volunteer groups were looking for him as well as law enforcement agents. Him being out of reach was the news story of the wizarding world. Why? He was just a 14-year-old. What was the weighing of the wand ceremony? Why would the weight of his wand matter for the tournament? He did not recall his wand being given a weight when he bought it. Ollivander told him the length but not weight. Was it like Muggle boxing? An official weighing in before a fight? That didn't make sense. Boxing had weight classes. Do wands have them as well? Were there school wands and competition wands? Was the weight important because this was a wand competition instead of using something like a staff? Was that even a thing? Harry's thoughts ran adrift from what was pertinent. Yes, well, Amelia, you can see this has been sorted out now and Harry needs to be prepared with the rest of the champions. Headmaster Dumbledore, while this is an informal questioning, you are still required to only speak when spoken to. Remain quiet or you will be removed. Harry made a mental note to not upset this woman. Compared to McGonagall's version of stern, it would leave her looking like a declawed cat compared to this woman. McGonagall was a stern authoritarian that was a no-nonsense kind of person. One that had a palpable aura of discipline. Director Bones had the authority and discipline aspects down. Where she differed from the teacher was her radiating feelings of power, fortitude and confidence, as though she could handle anything you could throw at her. To answer your question, Mr. Potter, your magical guardian, Headmaster Dumbledore, reported you missing and my department has been searching for your whereabouts ever since. As you arrived here unharmed, can you tell me where you have been since you were last seen in Diagon Alley? They knew he had been to Diagon Alley. His meeting with Bloodfang should be confidential if they follow Muggle world banking privacy standards, so that should be fine. Though that did make his mind connect to a rather salient point. Wait, I think it would be best to clarify something first. I do not have a magical guardian, Harry stated with a frown on his face. As far as he was aware, he was legally considered an adult for the duration of the tournament. He'd sent his letter of withdrawal to Hogwarts stating he would be finding alternate education this year. Why was he reported missing? The frown deepened with his confusion. Mr. Potter, all minors in the wizarding world have a guardian. Minors with Muggle guardians must have a magical guardian to assist with making informed decisions on matters within the wizarding world. Since your guardians are listed as Vernon and Petunia Dursley, you were assigned a magical guardian. Headmaster Dumbledore has assumed the role since your parents' death, according to the records we have on file. It made sense that he should have a magical guardian, but why had he never been informed? The headmaster had never told him or helped him make any decisions in the magical world. He'd sent Hagrid to introduce him, and the Weasley family took him shopping for school supplies. What were his responsibilities to Harry as his magical guardian? Had he failed Harry there too? Well, there is one major point of contention with this situation then. I am not a minor. The grin on his face must have shown because he got a puzzled look from Amelia Bones, and he did not catch the headmasters by glancing over at him. Explain. Wizards are not considered an adult until they are 17. Harry liked how she conducted herself. She was smart, direct, and straightforwardly dealt with him. He'd added a new element and she took it in stride, asking for an explanation while giving him the counterargument to why his statement should be false. She did not accuse him of falsehood, though, as most of the adults he had ever dealt with would have. She asked for an explanation instead of assuming she knew better than him. Perhaps it was his grin that led to her treating him differently than he had always experienced from authority figures. Harry took a second to marvel at the Chamber of Secrets again. Just yesterday it had given him some educational material that was not related to magic. It was, from what Harry could tell, on expanding his rational abilities. How to think and present yourself logically. It would get immediate use. He had no idea there were actual terms for differing styles of argumentation. As I understand it, there were consequences beyond just being a Triwizard champion. Let me present it with deductive reasoning. If only adults are allowed entry into the tournament, all the champions are adults. Harry Potter is a Triwizard champion. Harry Potter is an adult. I can tell you Gringotts confirmed the deductive argument was both valid and enforced by magic. Harry saw no reason to also let them know that it was only temporary while the magic of the goblet enforced the contract. I see, was the simple reply from Director Bones. It was easy to see she was deep in thought on how the new information would affect things. Harry snuck a look at Dumbledore, who was running his fingers along his beard. He too appeared deep in thought, though their looks different. Amelia Bones was pensive and contemplative. Dumbledore was both of those, just with an added air of resignation and frustration. Harry gave them a moment as neither looked like they were ready to continue the conversation immediately before he voiced his next question. I'm still at a loss of how this became a missing persons case. Amelia quirked her head diagonally to the left, as she focused back on the recently emancipated minor, giving him her full attention. The case was opened when news broke of you no longer being seen in Hogwarts, and after the magical guardian we had on file was unable to explain your absence. That didn't make any sense, Harry realized. Dumbledore must not have allowed anyone to know he had withdrawn from Hogwarts. He had no idea how to legally do so, but the director of the DMLE should have been made aware of that letter. I informed Hogwarts in a letter that the Goblet of Fire chose me as a competitor for no-named school. I decided it would be best to withdraw from Hogwarts and not attend it at present. They were informed I was seeking education elsewhere, and due to the secure nature of my accommodations, I've been cut off from the outside world. Harry had to hide a smile as the revelations changed Amelia Bones' line of sight from Harry to the headmaster. It seemed she did not enjoy information being withheld from her. Dumbledore, though, seemed ambivalent to this occurrence. And where have you been learning, Harry? Hogwarts is the premier school of magic and the safest place for you. We can get you caught up to continue in your studies here. Harry, my boy, Dumbledore told him with his normal patronizing grandfatherly tone. Safest place for me? Harry scoffed and scowled at Dumbledore. He was upset with the man, and Harry's cursory thoughts about him being a rather useless magical guardian was still percolating in his emotions. Mr. Dumbledore, Mr. Potter is an adult and can make his own decisions at this time. Harry loved the blatant use of a patronizing tone she reciprocated at the aged wizard. She turned to give her attention fully to Harry. If you were not in fact missing and have no concerns, I will end this interview and apologize for wasting your time. Our investigation was conducted with the understanding you are a minor at the request of your former magical guardian. We can shift any further inquiries that way. I have not been missing, Director. I have been studying magic with time for nothing else. Are you able to tell me what this weighing of the wands ceremony you referenced earlier was? You said I missed it, but I don't even know what it is and why I wasn't told about it. Amelia continued her death glare at the headmaster as Harry spoke. She did not look impressed. The weighing of the wands is a traditional part of the tournament. A wand maker comes to check that the wands of the champions are in good working order, and it is normally a large meet and greet with the press. This year, they had a podium for the champions to be asked questions. They were told by your former headmaster that you were aware of the event and had failed to show up. She practically growled her final statement. Thank you for fully informing me, Director Bones. Harry blatantly failed to hide his smirk at his sarcastic comment. He wasn't sure where this newfound confidence had come from. He was enjoying the results of his changed demeanor when dealing with authority figures. He'd have never taken an open shot, even as minor of a single sarcastic comment, at Dumbledore before. It wasn't a concern of Harry's, as it could be a combination of a number of innocuous things like he was an adult now. Amelia Bones shared his opinions, and he was still annoyed at the headmaster for his lack of action regarding him. Mr. Potter, you are needed with the other champions. The task starts shortly. Please exit out the door and continue to the left. You can't miss it. The low-key growl in her voice hadn't dissipated, and Harry reminded himself, mentally, that he should not piss off this witch. He gave her a nod and a quick thanks before he fled from the room. He quickly followed the directions and found the appropriate room. He walked out to the left and into where he saw Cedric, Fleur, and Victor all congregated. He walked into the large open room and made his way towards the other champions. Harry, where have you been? Cedric practically yelled out, so startled to see the young man. Harry continued stepping further towards the three champions that were standing together. He smiled at Cedric. Harry thought he would be more upset with the Hufflepuff, considering Cedric had done nothing to help stop his house's hate. The boy's greeting threw that plan right out the window, as he seemed to have a genuine care about Harry's well-being. I've been around, Harry responded neutrally, not sure how much or what he even wanted to say. He really just wanted to get the task over with and go back to his sanctuary. He still felt worn out from the ritual. Around? You haven't been around here, that's for sure. Didn't you see the papers? They've done almost daily articles on your disappearance. You weren't kidnapped, were you? The questions flew out of Cedric's mouth. Harry was a little wide-eyed as he'd not been on this side of the Hufflepuff loyalty before. He'd already seen the negative side both in this year and in his second year. Well, I just finished meeting with Director Bones and I told her I was never missing. Plus, I'm an emancipated minor now who withdrew from Hogwarts. It's not like I should have been here either. McGonagall was sent a letter explaining all of this. I'm pretty sure the director and headmaster are discussing just that right now. Smiling at that final thought. Harry was ambivalent to all the media frenzy, and he simply hadn't seen it in person. Being told you're the main wizarding news story and understanding what that meant in reality were two very different things. Harry had experienced staring and strangers wanting to meet him, but nothing much beyond that. Him being 11 years old on his return to the wizarding world helped. Adults did not want to make such a young boy feel even more uncomfortable than he already clearly was. Harry had kept his gaze on Cedric, who just nodded, not knowing how to respond to the younger boy. "You withdrew from Hogwarts?" Fleur asked incredulously. It was pretty well unheard of for a student to withdraw from the prestigious school. She had heard rumors of some substandard teaching in a few classes, but Hogwarts still had world-renowned professors. Flitwick was a charms master of the highest degree. His background as a world champion duelist made his resume all the more prestigious. When he retired from the circuit, he was sought after by more than just magical schools. McGonagall was the only apprentice Dumbledore had taken in Transfiguration, and he was the leading Transfiguration master for what felt like the last century. Dumbledore himself was one of the most knowledgeable wizards holding masteries in multiple fields. Beyond those three, Severus Snape was the youngest person ever to have created a new potion. That achievement met the requirements to doll out an automatic mastery in potions, making the man the youngest ever to have achieved that feat as well. Babbling was an up-and-coming runes mistress that had been highly respected in her major publication that bestowed her mastery. Her ongoing academic publishing was considered to be at the pinnacle of what was currently being produced in academia. She was sought after to consult on projects and did exceptionally well with it. Septima Vector was the arithmancy professor here, and she also was one of the most desired consultants in her field of study. There may be a few weak points in their faculty, but there was still a reason Hogwarts was the foremost school in the magical world. It held the position of being renowned beyond its longevity and famous founders. Voluntarily leaving Hogwarts was not something one did on a whim. There must be a reason beyond wanting to be privately tutored. Fleur did not know Harry well enough to really ask that question, nor was the final few minutes before the first task the ideal place to get to know him. Harry did not want to elaborate on his situation with anyone. The fewer people knew, the better it would be for him. "Given my history here, it's for the best," was all he was willing to say. He caught her frown as she heard his answer, and it felt a little odd that she inquired beyond what Cedric has asked. The same girl that had been nigh unapproachable. Cedric was the kind of person that would inquire about his well-being. Fleur, from the little Harry had noticed of her before the selection night, had seemed haughty and standoffish. Not the personality type to inquire further about one of her competitors unless it could give her an edge. Her frown didn't seem like it was because she didn't get any useful information. He also hadn't discerned any haughty or frigid tone to her questions or demeanor towards him. Victor had just silently observed the discussion.